Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Our next presentation is Michael Horn. And, well, gosh, what can we say? Yeah, we're back to the Billy Meyer case yet again. But you know what? It's still the most important case out there. It's still the case with the most hard, solid evidence. It's still the case with the most hard, solid information. It's still the case where the contact doors are giving us absolutely time after time hard, verifiable, say it again, verifiable predictions of where we're going to go if we don't change the direction that we're headed. Yeah. It'll be controversial yet again, maybe more so than ever. I hope nobody brought, you guys didn't let anybody bring tomatoes in, did you? Buckle your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Horn.
Thank you, Bob. And in conclusion, right? Well, you may feel like that after a while. I'm just, Bob's warning about controversial. I guarantee you this will be controversial. First, for Terry, for Bob, and their family, we do this with a great deal of love. We're going to have a little different kind of a setup here. This is the first prologue, if you will. And this is for some special recognition for Lee and Britt Elders. Many of you people who are familiar with the Meyer case may know of them. You may not know them. They don't run around and make a lot of public presentations, probably none at this stage of the game. They have a background that's quite rich as professional electronic countermeasure specialists and private investigators, people who served to secure valuable, important data and facilities for Fortune 500 companies and banks, government offices. I'm going to just kind of reiterate what we have on the screen for those that can't read it if you're far in the back. They have been, ever since they came forward with the Meyer case, they were personally attacked along with Meyer, but they got more than their unfair share of attack, and largely from the UFO community, quote unquote, because Meyer's photos and films and things like that were simply too good to be true, and it had to be a hoax, and they had to be in it for the money and what have you. Well, they persevered. They were forced to move. They had invested a lot of their own money in this. We have a long presentation. I'm going to try to make this not feel overly long, but the people that need to have some recognition, we're going to give it to them. And I know that everybody here knows Wendell Stevens. Most of us are probably not familiar personally with either Tom Welsh or Jim Delatosa or any of the other people that may have assisted and worked in the research investigation of this case. So also let me add, when I say that I've been researching the case for 28 years, I've been researching their work as well as all of the rest of the information, material, and people that have been available to me, going to Switzerland, interviewing people, etc. So we owe them a very large debt of gratitude, because without the work of Lee and Britt, Wendell, Tom, and Jim, this would never have come to the world. Okay? Now, I'm also going to do something I've never done before, because I am nearly 30 years into this, if you will. So this is a personal saga for me. There are things here that I want to just go through, and bear with me. You're going to see ultimately why I'm doing this part of it. So I'll try not to belabor it, and I will also try, here's a little aside. How many people here ever saw The Lord of the Rings, the last one? Like 3 hours long? Somebody invited me to that, and I nicknamed it the Budweiser Bladder Invitational. You just have to sit there and watch it. We're going to give you an intermission, so don't worry about that. Now bear with me, and we're going to roll through this a little bit. In the early 1960s, I was an art student, I was a painter, I was winning prizes and selling my paintings and what have you. Shortly thereafter, I went to New York. I had an idea to miniaturize art and put paintings on fingernails. And to this day, people put paintings in fingernails because I started this silly fad of fingernail art. I moved on with my music in the 60s. In 1968, some friends and I wrote an animated projected cartoon series called Captain Tim and the Case of the Little Pollutions. It was all about air pollution. When I moved to LA with this script to sell it, I was told that nobody was interested in air pollution, so forget about the animated script. And here was a record called Captain Tim that I had produced in New York, and A&M put it out, and here was a major turning point in my life. Suddenly, I find the photo book put out by Lee and Britt and Wendell, the first coffee table-sized photo book on the Meyer case. And this changed my life, and it probably changed everybody's lives. It didn't stop me from pursuing other interests. In 1985, I created an educational video technique called Future Self. In '86, however, the contact reports fell into my possession, and we'll have a little more talk about that later. In '87, I was doing New Age comedy, stand-up and singing silly New Age songs, as is outlined here. In '88, I started to lecture on the case because also in '88, I had co-produced the Pleiadian Connection videotape with Randy Winters. And then I created something called Standing in Spirit in about 1990, which is the workshop that those of you who managed to endure the rest of this can participate in at the end of it. In '94, I was taken to Europe by this man who is a best-selling author, a consultant to the late Princess Diana. I helped to train European business and government leaders in my stress release and internal meditation process. In '94, I pioneered applications of water purification for Starbucks coffee. In '95, I created probably the first e-books on the internet. We called it e-books. And in '97, I was in 2 issues of Inside Kung Fu magazine doing advanced strength and flexibility Qigong exercises. In '99, and this will be important again later, is the first article I wrote for UFO magazine on the Meyer case. In 2002, I made my first presentation on the Meyer case, because in '95 I was at these conventions doing New Age comedy, etc. In 2003 I put out the 2 Sit and Get Fit tapes that I created, Regenerative Movement. I was teaching at hospitals and for senior facilities, which I still do to this day. In 2004, the Meyer Contacts, which I now call a collector's item because it has information on it that was published before the events occurred. And in 2004, I also put out another music CD. Okay, moving right along, this is the workshop in Standing in Spirit, another packaging of the videos I've done. In 2007, more publications, and now here, The Silent Revolution of Truth, which is a new film that we're producing on the Meyer case that's coming out. And again, if you bear with us, I don't mean that I have a split personality. I mean, if we all stay here together, you'll see a clip from that film. Now, of course, all these other things that I do, can do, still do. Why am I doing the Meyer case? Because, as it says here, it's either the biggest, most impenetrable hoax or the most important story in all of human history. But for decades, we've been told that these are hoaxes, that these are simply clever fabrications by a one-armed Swiss farmer. But could the skeptics prove it? And there have been plenty of them in the past 30 plus years. So the beginning of the skeptical challenge, that was 2001. And I'm here to announce that the contestants are dropping like flies. One of these skeptics hosts a very religious website, and he said, "I'd love to be a fly on the wall on Judgment Day." And I wrote him back and I said, "Be careful what you ask for, because there are Fliegenklatschers around." And that's Billy Meyer in one of his pastimes in the Freihof in Schmidt-Rudy, having his coffee and killing flies because they're just everywhere. And there's nothing wrong with killing flies. They carry diseases. Okay. So let's get back to the challenge. In 2001, an organization called CFI West, IIG, told me that Meyer's photos and films were an easily duplicated hoax, and that it would be no problem for the case investigator at the time to duplicate one of the photos and one of the films. That's all I asked for. 3 years later, they failed to do so. All they could do was come up with a few little photos of a model UFO, and they said, "Look, we have duplicated the effect of the Meyer photos." And I said, that's not really much of a trick, because you can get any kind of a sci-fi movie or disc, and you can see a duplication of an effect, will you submit your photos to testing? The same kind of testing that Meyer submitted his to, and they said, no. End of discussion. They were thrown off the Art Bell show. Now, contestant number 2 is James Randi. He confidently said that no one is stumped by the case. A child can see through the farce, though some adults have a problem with that. Presumably, I was one of the adults. After CFI West sunk slowly into the sunset, Randi said, now Michael has divined that I called the Meyer case a hoax. His powers of perception are remarkable. He finds things where they don't exist. Wonderful. So he retracts his attack. Of course, he doesn't send Billy a check for $1 million, and nobody was holding their breath for it. Contestant number 3 could have been contestant number 1 because he's been around the longest time attacking the Meyer case. His name is Cal Korff. He is an infamous debunker. I call him a fraud. He is an admitted liar, etc. But he is also known as Captain Cal of the Special Secret Services. With an outfit that he bought, apparently mail order, and a pretty little badge, he put himself up on a website from Czechoslovakia and announced that he was going to take care of the Meyer cult, that he owned Meyer's UFO photos, that new books were coming out by this company, that he had duplicated Meyer's photos, films, etc., and that he was filing a $25 million lawsuit against the Meyer cult and me. However, within a short period of time, his web pages were removed by his web host. No books were forthcoming. We called the publisher. They said we hadn't seen hide nor hair of him since the 1990s. He never was able to duplicate one of Meyer's photos. No suit was filed. And 16 questions that I had put to him on our first 2-hour radio debate in December of 2006, where I awaited the answers in the next radio debate, he failed to answer any of them, and he has apparently not only gained further anonymity, but he's now attacking the other debunkers. This is like one of those comedies of error. Contestants 4 or 5, 2 nice gentlemen, Gene Steinberg and David Biedny. Mr. Biedny claims that he is, and he probably is, a Photoshop expert, but they claimed that they had proved that Meyer had deliberately hoaxed out-of-camera double exposure using lights, a black curtain, and an enlarger. Here was the photo in question. Now, if you look down here, and I'm at a funny angle, but you'll see that there's a repetition. This structure right here, see it with the X on it, or the structure? That you can see traces of 3 images of that. Now, I point that out to you because, number 1, on a forum devoted, where they set up a forum devoted specifically to attacking me in the Meyer case, one of the other people who was a participant in the forum wrote in and said, I cannot confirm Biedny's conclusion that this photo is in fact a forgery, especially since his strongest point of evidence, the line near the top of the photo, was not observed in my own analysis. This guy, DX27S, I don't think I know him. He never wrote me. Now, more interesting to me was the fact that this gentleman, whom I've known for 50 years from high school or thereabouts, is a skeptic about UFOs, even the Meyer case. I don't believe any of this stuff. I said, fine. I had him look at the analysis by Biedny and the photographs in question. He said, the photo isn't a double exposure, it's actually a triple exposure. This probably was done in camera because as an accident, it would be very, very hard to do this outside of camera. And the skeptic should prove it by duplicating the photo. They refused to even try. And then, funny thing, they wouldn't comment on this one because there's no tricky artifacts of double exposure. There's simply this very bizarre light hovering over the parking lot on Meyer's property. And I might add that Lee and Britt Elders had seen a similar phenomenon there. But we're going to also return to this light a little later on when we discuss another aspect of this case. These 2 guys totally freaked out when I said to them, I wrote them, I said, there's just one of me and I've got you surrounded. They took it as a threat. And I've heard that these are 2 very large gentlemen. Okay. They also consider now that Korff is nuts because he started to attack them. So these people are infighting. If anybody here has been involved in this whole thing of debunkers and attackers and all that, take some small comfort in the fact that they are now biting each other. Contestant number 6 is a fellow I've never met, haven't even seen his photo. His name is Royce Myers, and he's got something called UFO Watchdog III, where he's posted my photo and Billy Meyer's photos, and he claimed that Meyer faked UFO photos and films, and he employed props and stop-motion cut photography to make UFOs disappear and reappear on film. However, this, I call him a very cowardly and faceless guy. He won't come forward and prove anything at all. As a matter of fact, when I challenged him, he would not submit any proof for his claims. He referred to Korff at one point. Now, what he says about Korff is, unfortunately, those who gave him credit for past deeds will also have egg spatter on them, and Korff's previous work on the Meyer case will surely suffer. Oh, gee. What should be said also about the Korff situation is he wasn't sued by the elders because when he put out his book attacking the Meyer case, he was underage. It was a very clever thing. Contestant number 7, got nothing personally against this guy. He just kind of jumped in again with another one of these, I know the Meyer hoax stirs up emotion. Almost everyone sees it for what it is, a hoax. So I wrote him and I challenged him, but our non-practicing attorney, Mr. Kimball, who is typical of many skeptics, failed to substantiate his claims with any evidence whatsoever. So imagine this. You've got lawyers coming on the internet, and this is the second of the lawyers, I won't even go into the other case, where they're making these statements and defaming somebody, and when you say, well, prove your case, give us your evidence, they have nothing. Of course, he did add to the fun because he's now calling Korff delusional. Contestant number 8. This is what this case has attracted and more, but these are the low points I'm giving it to you. A fellow named Jeff Ritzman. He's a professional photographer, he's a model maker, and he's a skeptic. And he claimed that he could duplicate these photos and video. This is the famous wedding cake ship. Many people still think this is a hoax. This is obviously some, collection of Christmas tree ornaments and what have you, and that's got to be a miniature tree. And this thing's just attached to it. Well, I know that it's going to be enormously hard, if not impossible, to read this. Even on my computer, it's hard. This is from a fellow named Randy Arena, who says that he has grown bonsai, miniature trees, for a long period of time, including fir trees, such as those that are depicted in the photograph by Meyer, which we're also going to look at in a moment. He says it's not possible for a miniature tree to produce what he calls new club-shaped growth as shown. And he also says the cones of a miniature plant only grow to adult size after many years. Well, this is a whole detailed email he sent me on why it was not possible for this photo in particular to have been a miniature based on this new club-shaped growth and these cones. If you can read it from the distance, it says, new spring growth of fir, cones large. Oops, let me go back. A 3.5 meter unmanned beam ship in focus. And of course, the cones in the tree are not in focus because they're closer to the camera. The photo taken treetop to treetop 40 meters above the surface. The story goes that Meyer was sitting on the rim of another craft taking these photos up in the tree. Now, look, let me just tell you, you're going to have to think your way through this. There are things that we can prove, we think we can prove, and there are things that are speculative, even though they may well be true. I don't personally have a means of proving them, or they haven't been disproved yet to this date. So this is going to be an exercise in discernment, discretion, critical thinking, and you're not here to believe anything, I hope. Here's the photo without the writing. And here's a close-up of it. Now, I do have to tell you that for all of the time that people have been claiming that they can duplicate this, nobody has produced anything that looks close to this. However, there's a garbage can lid here, and we were told that this wedding cake ship that you just saw, I'll go back, that the base of it here is simply a large garbage can lid. Now, it looks very similar to that. Of course, this looks like it's made out of metal, and the one Phil is holding here is clearly plastic. Now, this gets into some really bizarre territory. Let's march through it. This is a contact where the alleged extraterrestrial Ptah says to Meyer, regarding the controversy that has arisen about this garbage can lid and wedding cake ship, my assumption was correct that the utilization of the plan in regard to this flying device found wider-ranging interest than that merely futuristic forms of container lids were manufactured from them, as I communicated to you at our conversation on November 28, 1995. All right, some of this could get boring, but I have to put it out, so maybe later on you'll go through it and it'll help you to think through it. He's saying here that their extensive clarifications revealed that the device plans for this flying device, now here's a little asterisk I'll put in, the plans for this device had actually been impulsed in the 1920s to who? The pre-World War II, pre-Nazi Germans. Well, these plans were divided up and were used for further manufacturing as, for example, for various forms of decoration and holding devices, for exposed bolts for furniture shelves, as well as roller bearings. A flower pot base came about from another part of the plans and configured in accord with the plan's sketch. Even the surrounding pertinent special elements for the screening of the visibility of the flying body was carried over, meaning that what we saw there in the structure of that craft, there's certain things there that contribute to that craft, as these alleged Plejaren have it, being able to be screened from visibility. So he's saying everything was carried over here, and indeed so precisely and correctly that no difference exists between the plan sketches and the terrestrially created product. 17 different objects apparently were manufactured as inspired by these plans that got disseminated in various European countries, as well as America and Japan, where they found utilization for the planning and manufacturing of the most varied products, some of which are still produced and utilized on Earth today. So, you know, this is the stuff you can yawn through if you want, but there it is. Let's watch this. Hopefully, there's Billy in the lower right-hand corner. There's not a lot of sound to this, but you'll probably hear him when he zooms in on this garbage can lid several hundred feet from the camera. There it is, sitting basically motionless. Some people detect, they say, a little up and down motion. I don't know.
Okay.
Now watch the second zoom. That looks like what, 150 to 200 feet perhaps?
Guns.
Now that's the distance from the camera. Folks, that's not a miniature tree. But according to Mr. Ritzman, he had duplicated and even surpassed Meyer's beamship photos, and his didn't need a bonsai or model tree to hold him up. So let's look at some of these others where Ritzman claimed it was a model UFO with a bonsai or miniature tree. Pretty famous series. There's actually a few more, but many of these are available on the other discs. I don't want to bore you with it. There were some big problems with Mr. Ritzman's assertion. 6 independent forestry experts looked at the photos with Meyer's UFOs next to trees. All 6 of the forestry experts concluded that these were real, full-sized, mature trees. They identified the species and the height of the trees. And as they say on those game shows, there's more. Jeff Ritzman, in an email exchange, accidentally revealed that for 14 years, he'd been cultivating miniature trees. And to prove his claims against Meyer, he submits the following. Well, I have to explain this. He had made some little photos with models, but not next to any trees. And when I put it up on my website, and when I announced that I was going to be showing it here, he sent the following. Any use of my photos is a clear violation of copyright laws, as I have rejected Mr. Horn's request for use on 2 occasions. As you have located the copyright owner, I am again stating rejection of a request for use. And Mr. Horn is currently in violation. Now look, if you or I thought that something was a hoax, and we said we could prove it, and it had to do with supposedly teeny little model UFOs next to trees, and I was a tree cultivator, wouldn't I take a picture and say, post that up all over the world, let's bust this phony one-armed farmer and show him for the fraud and tree cultivator that he is. However, Mr. Ritzman declined and said that this and all further communications will be forwarded to my lawyer. Therefore, And then, of course, he had to ice the cake and said, I don't nor have I ever had any affiliation with Korf and never will. We are not colleagues, and I personally will have nothing to do with him. And that's the final word on that. It's pretty much the final word from Jeff Ritzmann. Well, couldn't Meyer have used models in his UFO photos, films, and video? Just because a whole bunch of different skeptics and debunkers and model makers and miniature tree cultivators couldn't prove it and couldn't duplicate it, does that really mean that he didn't use it? The truthful answer is no. That's not good enough. Let's find out. Here is a letter from Wendell Stevens in response to a question I asked him. He said to me, Dear Michael, there were 2 perfect models made by the MGM Studios Special Effects Department, which we carried to Switzerland and used in an attempt to duplicate any one of Meyer's photos. They were big 18 and 24-inch diameter models, perfectly painted to match the colors in Meyer's photos, his pictures. After we had suspended them in a number of the scenes photographed by Billy and had Billy photograph the model in those scenes for us from the same positions, I'll show more of that in a minute, as for the originals, with the same camera and identical ASA 100 positive slide film like originally used, we gave them to Billy. Later, I saw one of them hanging from the ceiling of his little lean-to study, which is now gone. I do not know what happened to them after that. Jim Delatoso easily identified the photos with the model in them, though we pretended we had found new pictures in Billy's files. When I first gave JD copies of the model photos we had shot, I simply said we had more UFO photos from Switzerland. After he looked at them, he wanted to know more about the new pictures, as they were not the same as the earlier ones. Excuse me. Then I told him how we made them. Regards, Wendell. In other words, they photographed the model, sent them in to Jim Delatosa for analysis without letting him in on it to see if he could determine if they were the same kind of photos. And in every case, as Wendell's written about before, he could clearly say that these were not the same kind of ship. And there were some very specific reasons for that, which I won't go into now, but we have it all on the website, the parameters of the testing, which accounted for that. So look at the detail on this ship, for example. If you can see, and I don't know how well, but there's a good deal of work around the rim and on the cupola. Now watch this. This is the large model. And we've never shown this before, but we figure it's about time. This was made by MGM. It cost $400 to be made at the time, in the early 1980s. So someone walks it around the grounds here to show what it would look like, and it's pretty good looking. Just look at it carefully and see if that looks as good to you as that, for instance, which was taken a couple of years before the model was ever made. And watch this. Especially watch the ship. There are going to be 2 lights that flash on and off, and I'll say when. I won't distract you with the green light. There. Now watch again. Right there. Did you see it? That's the sound of the ship. Were you able to see the little lights? That's in daytime, filmed rather, several years before a model was made. Now you saw what it took to maneuver a model around. There are 8 different film segments. We have as many as 3 of the UFOs hovering on them. For instance, here's a shot that Meyer has of 3 of the UFOs, again taken before a model was made by the MGM Special Effects Department. Here's another photo taken from a film that Meyer shot, where the 3 UFOs hover and then 2 just disappear in one frame. And the one in the center remains, which even from the distance and the distance you're sitting at, you should be able to determine is far better made and more detailed than what we just thought. So that's what we just saw. That should be food for thought. So my suggestion to the skeptics would be to try saying this out loud. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. And if they would repeat that frequently, we could all make progress together, because actually there's nothing wrong with healthy skepticism. I'm sure you agree. As a matter of fact, in a moment I'm going to offend a lot of people here, because I happen to also be a skeptic. and a skeptic about some things that are held near and dear to people in the UFO community. So the final results, the failed skeptic challenge to the Meyer case is, in my opinion, now over. If anybody wants to go ahead and show us how he did it, then you certainly can try to revive that. Excuse me. Now here's where we put up the screen for me so the tomatoes don't hit me while I do my presentation. Introducing the first annual Dubious Achievement Award for Overactive Imagination. And the winner is... Did I say this? Exopolitics for their version of The Emperor Has No Clothes. Let me explain. Let me quote. There are an extensive number of extraterrestrial races known by various research institutions and agencies to be currently interacting with Earth and the human population. Michael Salla also goes on to say, in a separate location, Alex Collier is a genuine, lifelong Andromedan contactee. Is there a problem with any of that? Why am I making an issue? Well, I said that I got the contact reports in 1986. I wrote about how I acquired them in an article in 1999 in the Beyond Great UFO Photos, UFO magazine. So this is an excerpt, and since you can't see it, I'm going to give you some of the highlights or lowlights, because this is important to me, and I'll explain why. In 1986, I won't read every word, I'll give you the point of this. I was in a little cafe in Sedona, Arizona, with my daughter and a lady who was a friend of mine. We were the only people in there with the exception of one guy sitting in the back. It was a health food cafe. Now, if you have ever ordered an avocado sandwich in a health food cafe where there's hardly anybody in it, you know that exponentially it's going to take that much longer for the sandwich to be served. So we got to talking with this fellow who was in the back of the cafe. It was a very nice guy. His name was Ralph Amagran. Ralph revealed to me in our little discussion that he was a former IRS agent and that he was now very involved in studying UFOs and fascinated with the field. One thing led to another, and we came upon the discussion of the Billy Meyer case, and he said to me, "Have you read the contact notes?" And I said, "No, what are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, you've got the book by Lee and Britt." And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "You know those quotes with those funny names?" I said, "Yeah." He says, those are the extraterrestrials talking, and they told Billy a whole bunch of stuff. And I've got 1,800 pages up there. It's great. When you come back to LA, come up to Decker Canyon, and I'll show them to you. So I did. When I got back to LA, I looked up Ralph, went up there. We spent a lot of time we spent maybe a half a dozen different visits with each other. He gave me the 1,800 pages, which was very generous. And at night, we would stand outside and we'd be on UFO saucer watch. And as my little article here says, I'll get back to this page in a second. As the page says, we probably saw more UFOs per evening, which were Cessnas, seagulls, whatever. But Ralph had a tremendous imagination, a fertile imagination, even more fertile than my own. However, now we get to the sticky stuff. It came to the attention of Michael Salla in the Exopolitics Forum that I was telling this tale about Alex Collier. Oh yeah, because Ralph later changed his name to Alex Collier. I was at an expo in LA and I saw Ralph walk by. This was a few years later. And I said, "Hi, Ralph." And he didn't say hello to me. I felt a little funny. There was a little contingent of people, and so when one of the ladies came by later on, I said, "Hey, what's with Ralph?" She said, "Who's Ralph?" I said, "The guy you're walking." She says, "That's Alex Collier, lifelong Andromedan contactee." I said, "That's funny. He used to be Ralph Amagran." Oh, well. So I was being chewed out on the Exopolitics board for lying about this and for making terrible slanderous remarks. And I was also told on the forum there, Meyer wasn't authentic, and he's certainly not the only genuine contactee. And finally, after I was losing my cool, let me tell you, all over the place, so Michael Salla sent me links. He said, "Here's where you're going to find the proof that Alex Collier is the real deal, and you'd better go check this out before you open your mouth again, buddy." So I did, and I've some of the excerpts of what I found. Here's some of the prophecies, literal prophecies from Alex Collier. The moon is an artificial hollow structure that can pull out anytime it wants to. It's 11,421 miles in diameter, as opposed to the actual 2,160 miles in diameter that Earth scientists determined. There's a bridge on the moon that's 21 miles long. The same structure exists on Venus, despite the fact that the surface temperatures would have melted anything. Between 1996 and 1997, 1/3 of Japan will sink below the ocean surface. And did that happen? Did I miss it? Okay. Extraterrestrials will land and show themselves in 97, and between 96 and 2004, major U.S. cities are under TB quarantine. Not only that, but on August 12, 2003, the moon will be gone. It's out of here. It's had enough. The New World Order has 35,000 people, Earth people, living in compounds on the moon. You can kiss them goodbye too, because they're going wherever the moon's going. Hundreds of thousands of children each year are taken by Greys, Orions, and Pleiadians, and they're gone. The reptilians enjoy human flesh, and human children are best. They had some temperatures there, I don't know, steam, boil, bake. Our system originally contained 3 suns, and our original blood color was green and blue. And perhaps the most accurate quote of all: there is life as we speak, right now, on Uranus, according to Ellis. Okay. Now, on top of that, since this lifelong Andromedan contactee had come forward with volumes of this stuff, and I was the one who was incorrect, I wondered why he hadn't even taken one photo similar to this. Because this, according to Meyer, who at least has some evidence to argue about, this and the preceding photo I showed you of it, from a little race of Andromedans who are basically in semi-material and light form, and this is a light craft. This craft, supposedly, as they say, populated by little tiny Andromedan people, Meyer could have no contact with them. They simply came, they visited. The ship changed shape, it got longer, there was a ball of light at a certain point, but nothing from Alex to substantiate that story. So I was ticked. And to this day, and I asked many times, Michael, would you either explain or defend or retract your support for all that nonsense? You sent me these links. This man is a contactee, blah, blah. Nothing. So I say he can pick up his award backstage, or maybe show me where I've made my mistakes. Well, why can't we all just get along, and why do I have to be such a grumpy little troll and cause trouble here in the UFO community? Because, to the best of my knowledge, these claims are not true. Let's remember that I'm representing a case here of a man who's been vilified and had 21 attempts on his life for standing in his own truth. And when our future survival is the issue, which I have my position on it is that it is, why indulge in fantasies? Why should we run ourselves around in silly circles? If ETs really wanted to meet us, they've had a long time to do so. Well, then, what about me? Well, I'll tell you what about me. I'm frequently accused of saying that the Meyer case is the only genuine case. Everybody else is wrong. I'm overzealous, I'm impatient, and I have very, very, very bad netiquette. I flame on forums when I'm attacked. The truth is that I'm often guilty of that, all of that stuff. But I still haven't seen anything comparable as proof for any other case in more than 28 years. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, that you or somebody else doesn't have it. I simply have not seen it. And so, let me make this clear. This is the position as expressed by Guido Musburger that expresses Meyer's point of view and that of the alleged extraterrestrial Plejarans. The language of diplomacy as commonly used among us on Earth serves primarily as a means of gaining some type of advantage at the cost of others. The realities are usually improperly and falsely rendered with this form of language, and they degenerate into deadly misunderstandings. The truth may never be spread in diplomatic form. Truth must call the facts by name as they really are, straightforwardly, without belittlement or misappropriation. Further, according to this regarding Meyer, to the regret of modern mankind, a prophet denounces all grievances with aggressive words and spares no one and nothing in doing so. For those who feel personally addressed, this is naturally not very flattering and does not suit them the least bit. But with the current deplorable state of affairs on Earth, the necessary clarity cannot be accomplished by any other way than with harsh language. So what are we really searching for? If it isn't diplomacy and everybody getting along and just saying, yeah. We're searching for what the I Ching calls inner truth. I love this because it's such a nice little poetic Eastern way of putting it. And this is important, and I guess not everybody can read this, so bear with me. I'm not going to make you listen to me read everything here, but this one's a good one. But it's important to understand on what the force of inner truth depends. This force is not identical with simple intimacy or a secret bond. Close ties may exist also among thieves. It is true that such a bond acts as a force, but since it is not invincible, it does not bring good fortune. All association on the basis of common interests holds only up to a certain point. Where the community of interest ceases, the holding together ceases also. And the closest friendship often changes into hate. Only when the bond is based on what is right, on steadfastness, will it remain so firm that it triumphs over everything. And that's what we have to keep in mind in our world, in our lives, on every level. And no one has the exclusive ownership of truth, not the alleged Playaran or Billy Meyer or Guido Mutzberg or me, you, or anyone else. We each have to find it and find it for ourselves. We can disagree, but if our goal is the same, if we want to get to the truth, we are in common purpose. We can forgive a little bit of overzealousness, harsh language, etc., if we understand that this external evidence, all of it, requires internal evaluation. So with the Meyer case, we have to go beyond the physical evidence. I have enough material if you want to evaluate the photos and films and sounds and metals. We've got DVDs and books and all sorts of great stuff. But we want to determine the credibility of the Playaran information. So what is it that I'm still trying to prove? See this? One of the sheets of the contact notes, contact reports. I alluded to it earlier, the 1,800 pages of the transcripts that Meyer had produced by 1978. By the end of it, of his 3 years or so of official contacts, he claimed. There was a numbering system put in place here that was simple and foolproof and helped to authenticate these documents, because Meyer had to number each sentence that was spoken by one of these alleged extraterrestrials. And this rendered the documents unalterable and eliminated revision after dissemination. And the reason for it was really cool, because these documents were actually being translated into, that was originally in German, they were getting translated into as many as 5 languages starting in the mid-1970s. So every place that an alleged extraterrestrial said in sentence number 6, I want to tell you the following, it was the same sentence in every language and in every copy. That meant that Billy Meyer couldn't go back years later and make himself look good and hot and fancy as a quote-unquote prophet by changing it. So what we have in texts and even in copyrighted, published, dated books is what was in those documents. There are some exceptions where we cannot prove prior publication. I'll just tell you that right up. But we have enough of them where a critical thinker is going to have some ahas. In this 35th contact in 1975, Meyer was given abundant information about the connection between A-bomb explosions and all of this damage to the environment. Elementary radiations going up into the UV, damage to the ozone layer, etc., etc. And I was reading this in 1986. Alex had given me these documents, and I got to read all these conversations and all this information. A lot of neat scientific stuff in there. I say here that Meyer published it 13 to 17 years before new discoveries. Well, what I mean is, I first saw in this newspaper in 1988. 2 years after I'd read the documents, I had stuck them under my bed. There was nothing more I could do with them. I'd think about them, occasionally pull something out and read it. But in 1988, I see this article about a new discovery from Lawrence Livermore Labs. And it says that A-bomb testing is tied to the ozone depletion. And they give this percentage and everything. I'm thinking, Why does that not seem like a new discovery? And so I went under the bed and pulled out the dusty, 100-page bound folders. And I opened it up and I start leafing through it. As early as the 7th contact and then later in the 35th contact, etc., is all this information about the environmental damage. But Meyer is also in there in 75 referring to when he was told this before in the 1950s. And I didn't have access to that. I couldn't know what he was talking about. But like this other article here about the ozone hole damages the food chain that was published in 92. That's in there too. Now here was, in 1976, Semyaze says to him, that is to be understood in this way, that Earthman exploits his planet and robs it of the fundamental life energy in that he robs from it the underground oil and gas and the most diverse ores. This leads to the fact that the Earth suffers shifts within, which leads to enormous volcanic eruptions and earthquakes because slowly the Earth collapses from within. 1990. Earthquakes, oil interact, according to Dr. or Professor Paul Siegel, where he sees the connection between extracting gas and oil from the Earth and precipitating earthquake and volcanic activity. But I found out later on that that wasn't the first time that Meyer mentioned that either. But it's good enough because this was the first public article I could find when I did an internet search. So when I tried to either prove or disprove Meyer's so-called prophetic information, I went on and did what you can do. I went on the internet and I would put in the circumstance or the situation and look to see if it occurred, what were the details, and what's the first known publication of it. In each case, with the exception of one of the literally dozens and dozens, first of all, they all occurred. With the exception of one case where Meyer wasn't the first person to publish the information, he was the first person to publish it in all other cases, including earthquakes, landslides, wars, terrorist activities, deaths of people, etc. That got my attention. The Earth will not come to rest because earthquakes of much greater magnitude will shake her. However, they will be of a terrible magnitude to a degree that nations and islands will sink. Unusually severe droughts will move across the world in order then to be succeeded by flooding of severe proportions. Well, that got me to thinking, so I went back and started to read. I wanted to know what the Pleiaren thought about this and about that. Maybe I'd missed some things. So pertinent to what we're involved with, I wanted to know, what do the Pleiaren think about, we're jumping around here, UFOs? According to them, most sightings, nowadays for sure, are secret military craft, and the UFO cover-up started in 1915. We have free articles on my website where you can read the transcripts where they flesh this out. I'm giving you some bullet points. In 1915, over the battlefields of Europe, these objects were seen hovering. Each side thought it belonged to the other. They finally figured it out that it's not ours, it's not theirs. And there was a pact, a de facto agreement made, whereby nobody would let this whole extraterrestrial thing become known, and that the major powers in agreeing to not disclose also kind of went along with the negative ET image as promoted and promulgated by the U.S., especially through, I guess, the Roosevelt and Truman era. The War of the Worlds radio broadcast, some of you know about that, was done with some severe arm twisting to both H.G. Wells and Orson Welles. Under threat to their lives and their families, they would go ahead and get this tailored for radio, and he would do it, and they would start to put out an image, an idea of hostile, deadly, deformed, weird alien creatures coming here to harm us. Some of this information has already been alluded to some degree. There's more in the Meyer material on that. They also say that part of the agenda is for a fake UFO attack. Now, you may notice that in the past several months, we've had the O'Hare Airport in, what is it, North Carolina, and someplace else recently. Where's that? Yes, whatever he said. That they're seeing, UFOs, and people are getting some vague photos and what have you. Gee, all of a sudden, that's making the news and the Drudge Report and everything else, right? Where you couldn't buy your way in with a new UFO story just a few months ago or a year ago. Now there's UFOs all over the place. Well, control of the masses, and I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, I really am not. I don't go for most of it. I don't doubt it, though, at this point. The biochipping, we see evidence of that. They were telling Meyer about this, Well, you'll see. Meyer wrote about it even earlier. Cloning, according to Meyer, has been going on for 30 years in this country. It's secret military levels in various types of ways, not only a genetic type of cloning, but through drugs and surgery, the altering. And what they are saying is that a lot of what we think are extraterrestrials, if and when we see, if it isn't a hallucination or a bad dream, and there's a real interaction, they're saying, sorry folks, those ain't coming from out there, they're coming from down here. Well, now that we are stirring those waters and having a lot of people go, I don't think so. What do they say about extraterrestrials? Terrestrials? Well, overpopulation is a huge problem, but that's probably not what they meant by that. Okay. According to the Plejaren, and this is when you get into the vast histories contained in the Meyer material, for which the contact reports from the 1970s as well as ongoing contain the details of so much, it's beyond imagination. It certainly was actually even beyond Ralph's imagination. There's a fellow whose name was pronounced Nocodemian, and more than 12 billion years ago, it is alleged, this is speculative because I can't prove it, right? Neither can you, I guarantee you. He was a progenitor of races and a very wise, highly developed being, and he had some peoples that he was kind of, if you will, a ruler over. I guess it happens all the time. These people split into two main lineages. One group settled in what were called the Lyrian territories, Lyra Vega star system, and the other group settled in the Sirius star system. And many of our own distant ancestors are said to have originated there in the Sirian star system because they were supposedly bred as a warrior race for this group. This group decided to alter its own genetics to only move itself towards harmony, abundance, peace, spiritual things, beauty, opulence, and the arts. And they actually genetically engineered out of themselves their own fighting spirit as well. They then became prey for other races that were space travelers who saw them as an easy mark. Well, they caught on pretty quickly that they had to rectify their own condition, and in the process, they brought a race into being of humans, and they made a couple of specific genetic modifications to them. They dropped the lifespan down from way beyond 1,000 years to under 100, and they increased the propensity for violence and aggression so they'd be a willing warrior race, but they wouldn't live long enough to overthrow their overlords, because part of building in this limited lifespan had to do with building in propensity for degenerative diseases of all sorts. So they're in the genetic code, a lot of these things. These colonizations that were part of the Lyrian and even the Syrian system, peoples had gone on over countless millennia. People had come to this planet as far back as 22 million years ago. The Lyrians came here prominently 389,000, 289,000, and even as recently as 13,500 years ago. This means that there were comings and goings. Sometimes there'd be people that would stay here, build a civilization. It would rise, it would fall. Some people would be stranded in a relatively primeval world. If their technology failed them, they would revert. They would actually degenerate. Some of these people were quite gigantic. The Lyrians were gigantic warriors with high tech available. While they were oftentimes spiritually developed people, they weren't always operating according to what we might even call spiritual development. 133,000 years ago, we're told in the Meyer material, is the actual inception of Atlantis and Mu, sometimes called Lemuria. And we have here just a couple notes about some people like Aros, who was an extraterrestrial human being who attacked the Sumerians, who were descendants of the Syrians, and this was in India, Pakistan, and Persia. The gods, these different high-powered extraterrestrials, were called Ishwish in this Lyrian language that is still used by the Plejaren, this term. And Ishwish, or Ishrish for the females, these were the gods. And they have come down, as you'll see, and as we already know, through all of our legends. So many gods and races came. Some were stranded here, some degenerated, as I said. The key is that all of them in time forgot their true extraterrestrial origins and histories. Even the ones that settled on the other planets in our solar system, such as Mars and Malona or Maldek or Phaeton, They had no idea of their own origins. And even the extraterrestrials that brought them here, taking them from the Syrian system so they wouldn't be destroyed once their usefulness had been outlived, even those extraterrestrials in time had lost track of their own histories. Now here's a really important thing. 52 million spirits, extraterrestrial spirits, let's see if I can actually hit this thing, of extraterrestrial humans who've come here over time and who died here on this planet, any time from millions to hundreds of thousands of years ago, whatever, accordingly have been incarnating or reincarnating on Earth. Therefore, many people, many among us are already of extraterrestrial origin. It's a big so what? Now this is for illustration purposes only, because I'm not telling you that these are authentic photos. These were gigantic warriors, and if these people indeed had been buried in the sands of Egypt, their skeletons might look like this next to the excavators. And this mock-up, according to a reported find, would show a human next to a drawing and a human femur bone of some assumed giant extraterrestrial that was here. Again, this is for illustration only. Don't show this to your children. So here's a little poem for you. Let's try a little right brain. There once came a race of giants from a distant war-torn star, looking for new worlds to conquer, to spread power near and far. Protected by their loyal soldiers called guard angels, cherubim, the leaders soon established order for their new reign to begin. With their knowledge and their wisdom, they did alter forms of life. Masters of the laws of science, of their deeds would ancients write, that they took a wild human, mixed in her celestial seed. For 1,000 generations, we've misunderstood this deed. From this one, many descended, their days marked with pain and blood. Kingdoms came and kingdoms ended. Few survived deluge and flood. Other races, same, were fashioned, or from stranded travelers grew. Star seed mixed through human passion. Sons of gods were formed anew. Above them, in a ship did hover one who called himself their Lord, demanding worship of no other. With threats of vengeance he enforced. Over time, the races scattered, distant memories they preserved, handed down through spoken legend and in books as holy word, regarding the extraterrestrial presence on Earth. There once was a splinter group from the Plejaren. They were called the Giza Intelligences, or the Ba'ath. They were based deep beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. There was a leader named Arusem, who was a brother of Ptah and Salem, who ruled until 3010 BC. We probably know the name Ptah. We've heard it from ancient Egypt as well as from the alleged extraterrestrial of these times. Then Jehovah, who was also known as Hen. Then, Kamagal the first in 2080 BC. He started his reign then. Kamagal the first was the one who introduced blood sacrifice to earthly religions, not only in the Middle East, but in South and or Central America. All terrestrial religions were created or assisted in creation and misdirected by the Ba'ath. They controlled hundreds of politicians and religious leaders. They were the hidden negative force behind the Tula and society and Hitler. They did this through a sophisticated telenotic electronic means of mind control. Kamagal II was engaged in the mass murderings of Earth humans. He was a force behind this type of thing. He lived a long time, finally died in 1976, according to the Plejaren. They were creating a false second coming, which Meyer was introduced to in this chamber down deep below the Great Pyramid, where he saw artifacts, a remanufactured cross of the crucifixion, a spear, bag of old coins, blood-encrusted nails, and crown of thorns. And he thought, he was a young man at the time, that Asket, one of the extraterrestrials, allegedly took him down there. And he said, this looks like this must be the crucifixion materials of the man Jesus. And she said, well, I got a couple surprises for you. One, he was never called Jesus. And number two, these were made by these people. And they're using this, they want to have a false second coming. There's a man named Reinhold Schmidt. He's a corn merchant in California, and they've been impulsing him with real visions, holograms, to make him think he's on board spaceships with them, and that he is the second coming, and he's going to be able to produce these artifacts and show everybody. And wow. Well, because the B'Phath inadvertently attacked a Pleiaren beam ship in 1978, the Pleiaren could act in self-defense and remove them from the planet. Remember, according to this, they were based here for thousands of years. Does this explode every time I do this? They were based here for thousands of years. And, okay, maybe I shouldn't say. That's it. And they were finally removed by the Pleiaren. It's a long story. It's already a long story. But their negative influence still lingers because they were behind so many of these religions, secret societies, blood cults, and political movements and isms to play both sides against each other. You understand? Okay. So according to the Pleiaren, true ET from out there human contacts are rare, and actual ET abductions actually rarer. Why? Because the Assyrian forefathers, for one thing, had genetically manipulated our ancestors. They shortened the lifespans. They increased our aggression. And with supposedly 42 million plus human races alone in this universe, ta-da, no one needs our corrupted, short-lived, and violent genes. And nobody's helping us to correct it. Our scientists will figure it out. Therefore, if you still think that ETs want to contact you, I'm not the one to argue with. Maybe you've been chosen for the petting zoo. I don't know. Careful, don't feed, they bite, etc., etc. So really, aren't we all citizens, all of us, these 42 million plus human and other perhaps non-human races, citizens of one universe, what the Pleiaren call this creation? This universe that they say is actually got spiral energy going through a basically egg-shaped structure that's got 7 belts to it. This blue area here, the material belt, supposedly in which all of space and planets and galaxies, that's existing within a belt of an actual structure, an egg-shaped structure. The universe, according to them. Some parts of this universe are absolutely empty of anything except spiritual energy. And my big question has always been, what's outside of space? Well, now my question has to be, what's outside of this creation or this universe? And I actually asked that of Meyer. I said, look, this whole thing, because they say there's literally billions of these and we're not in the first one. I said, well, that's great and that's mind-boggling, but I want to know what's outside of it. What is the void? Where is this stuff in this great nothingness? And he said, you know, I do not know that. The Pleiaren don't know that. The human mind cannot grasp that. The best we can understand somehow is that the void is an endlessness filled with fine spiritual energy. But that raises other questions, doesn't it? So there we are. Here we are, stuck in this big egg on a little piece of cosmic lint floating around in space. So really, is everybody being visited? I mean, do we have extraterrestrials walking around in the supermarket lines reading the Globe about extraterrestrials? Are they on subway trains? Or are they us too? And so what? What's the point? Let's get on with the real task at hand, if we may. Which, according to the Pleiaren, is to wake up. Every human being on this planet, wake the heck up and continue to wake up after the 8 to 12 we may get of slumber if we're lucky. The world is at the threshold of the silent revolution of truth. I want to tell you about that phrase, the silent revolution of truth. Allegedly, there was a contest held on the planet Era, a planet in the Pleiadian system that is not the Pleiades we see in the night sky, but beyond it, in an altered time-space configuration, which doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not a physicist. The contest was held with the populace there, which they keep well under 1 billion people, just over 500 million. And the contest was to encapsulate in a slogan, in a phrase, what Meyer's mission on Earth is about in this incarnation. And the winning entry was this little phrase, the silent revolution of truth. And the person that won this was named Claudina Icarina. She's an 11-year-old, at the time, 11-year-old Pleiadian girl, and her prize was to come with Ptah to Earth, to Switzerland, to beam into Billy's office, and to shake his hand and say hello to Billy Meyer. And there's actually a transcript in the contact notes where they have their little meeting, and it's just a very sweet little interaction. How nice to meet you. I know we may never meet again. It's just very non-dramatic, but that's the little rider on this term. So the Meyer case isn't really so much about UFOs and extraterrestrials as it is about the power of the human spirit. And that is that spark, that flame, that individual hologram of the creation, that the creation itself, this ultimate consciousness of all creation, all that exists within itself, it gives this holographic spark to each human, not the soul, which is a transitory temporal structure, but the human spirit, this immortal aspect that is put into each human being at the 21st day conception. If that proves to be true, we can resolve the abortion issue, as they have, because they say, well, we know that at the 21st day the spirit attaches to the embryo, so we don't do any abortions after that time. We're humans, things happen, we make sure that we do this beforehand, and we can detect when we're pregnant earlier than your females can, and we know when the spirit's coming, so we don't do that. So both sides are right, and both sides are wrong. But one thing is, there is no original sin that we are responsible for. The spirit comes in for each fresh new incarceration, perhaps, and then we are here to evolve over countless millions of lifetimes. And the consciousness and the personality form, again, the soul, mainly situated in the solar plexus, why it got called soul, constructs and comes into being. And the spirit is you'd say it's a perfect balance of positive and negative. We have to have both positive and negative experiences to grow. And so the spirit, too, has this potential for the positive and the negative. And over these countless millions and millions of lifetimes, the spirit, too, is evolving. It's not fallen. It's simply in a more ignorant state at the earlier stages of incarnation. Our human spirits, those of us sitting here, our spirits are already millions of years old, have gone already through hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of incarnations of shorter or lesser degree, and always as humans, never as animals, cantaloupes, or insects. Although it could be arranged. Now, that's the TH sound, I can't do that. Thousands of this. This is what the true prophets of all ages are trying to tell us. And it's the message that's been corrupted by virtually every religion. The power of the human spirit. And the problem is that all religion and all religions rest on the following inadmissible, catastrophically illogical premise. What's in this book is true because the book says it's true. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't truth in religions, books, what have you. But this premise, it's true because it's in this book. You can't do that in a kindergarten, first grade classroom if you start with books. You can't do that in a court of law or an institution of higher learning. You say something's true, you've got to go about proving it. I've been making presentations in the Meyer case for almost 20 years, quote unquote, to prove it. Proof is a matter of you take all of the best evidence and you have to think through it and come to some logical conclusion, not because it's in a Billy Meyer book or in a Bible or in any other form. So think about it. The person who chooses the religion, the God, is the authority. It's not the other way around. Here's an example. We have a big room like this. We set out some tables. We put out the Bhagavad Gita or the Mahabharata, whatever, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, name something else that's a holy book, whatever. Put it out. Of course, the Quran. And put this out, leave room so people can line up, and let 1,000 people who have no religious affiliation but are interested flood in, give them a week, and let them read the books. And then at the end of the week, or whenever arbitrary period of time, you say, okay, line up behind the truth. Every one of those books is going to have somebody in multiples lined up behind it. As many people as you have in the room, you're going to have, some of them are going to line up behind the one truth with the one God, and therefore, who's the authority in any religion? It's the person. This is the truth. This is the guy. This is the one. Well, I'm not picking on you, but don't you think we should start to recognize that we are authorizing on every level what's true in life? And I said in the beginning, it is up to us to figure this out. We have to discern it. Now, the Plejaren are less, quote-unquote, diplomatic. All earthly religions, and this was Asket from the Dal universe, not a Plejaren, are possessed by boundless power, greed, and the actual manifestation of the goal of all of them consists of gaining world dominion. Religion is the greatest and most dangerous power for the obtaining of world dominion, which without exception is striven for by all belief directions as far as they are aligned in a religious or secret society manner. Undoubtedly, all earthly governments are steered and led in religious manner, or at least are subject to a certain religious influence. And these governments, on the other hand, also independently undertake constant efforts on a political basis to seize world dominion for themselves. These vicious efforts on both sides have again and again led to war actions and to other death-bringing transgressions, whereby uncountable human lives were annihilated. Gee, could that be true? Well, you certainly don't have to believe that. You can think about it. You can also pick up the newspaper, turn on the radio, the internet. But thinking is an inside job, so think about this. Reincarnation is a fact of life. That's something to think about. And now think about this. Don't worry about dying. You'll live through it. That's the good news, right? So let's talk about prophets. I mentioned prophets before. I threw that off when I mentioned Billy Meyer as a prophet, and somebody here, certainly at least one person's going, oh, what do you mean? How can you say that? Prophets of the old age, Enoch or Henoch, and these are the years that the Plejaren say they were born and died in. We go from Enoch to Elijah, to Isaiah, to Jeremiah, to Emmanuel and Muhammad. Now I'm going to come back here. Let's just put it this way. Remember I told you long ago about Nocodemian, a being who was a very, very high-level being who had lived billions of years ago. It was said that he had gone through evolution and into the semi-material, semi-physical, into the totally energetic light body form, into the lower levels of spiritual realms. Speculation, I grant you. Don't know. It is said that that spirit agreed, instead of to continue in the spiritual evolution for billions and billions of more years in the disembodied form, to go back into the incarnational cycle, to function as a prophet on different worlds where lineages of its original peoples, remember, from the Lyrian Vegan system, had incarnated and gone south, just taken bad left turns and degenerated and become warlike and crazy and overly, zealous and religious and what have you. So this spirit form agreed to go back into incarnation, meaning it would have to forget on conscious levels its previous grandeur, elevated abilities and knowledge. And in each life, just like each of us, would have to be educated again by teachers who were wiser than the human being it would become in each human incarnation. Those human beings would be we're told, the Plejaren of going back 13,500 years ago. Remember we said some of the Lyrian came here? They had become also the Plejaren people. These histories are vast, they're complex, and they're fun to read through. So, with, bring that back up here? Okay. With the prophets of the old age, I said we had Enoch or Henoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and then we come to somebody, Emmanuel, what's that, with a J? That's the fella whose name got changed to Jesus, according to this information. We know in the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament, of which I know only very little and happen to have found that part, 7:14 or whatever, that Isaiah foretells the coming of Emmanuel, spelled either with an E or an I, but not with a J as it survived in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, in the book of Matthew, I think it's in the first chapter when you're talking about the birth of Jesus, in there suddenly, inexplicably, he has this thing about, and his name will be called Emmanuel. And somebody forgot to take the whole thing out because his name was supposed to be Emmanuel through the whole thing, if what's in the Meyer case is true. Now, Muhammad is said to also have been an incarnation of this same spirit form, as was in Emmanuel and Jeremiah before him, etc. His teachings, it is said, were also corrupted. We'll get to that. The prophet of the New Age, according to the Plejaren material, is a man named Billy Edward Albert Meyer. A man, a person, a human being. This brings us to our most important slide for this part of the program. Prophets and gods. They are always human beings, and they are never to be worshipped, deified, exalted, adored, but only respected as teachers, instructors, and way-showers. If history and religious history is any evidence of it, we know that they are also always having a rather thankless job. They will be persecuted, vilified, hacked up, crucified, attacked, their teachings falsified, they'll be turned into all sorts of things. So keep this in mind so that if the temptation arises, as it certainly will as we go farther into this, well, he's saying that Billy Meyer is a prophet, and his spirit's the same one as us. Oh my goodness, it's blasphemy. Well, no, it's just life. Meyer can type about 60 words a minute with one hand. He used to be able to type a little faster than is shown here. He could do that for hours at a time when he was receiving. Here, let me just explain in case you don't know about this. Allegedly, when Meyer has a contact from 75 on, whether it's in a meadow or in an office or in a ship, it's recorded on their devices. Big deal. We've got tape recorders too. When he gets home after a certain period of time, when he's rested up, he goes into his study. He used to just have an electronic typewriter, right? Now he's got the computer. They have a device that sends the entire conversation to him in symbol form, in pictograms, that he was trained since childhood to recognize well over 3 million different picture symbols and their meaning in German, and simultaneous as he receives it at 60 words a minute to type it out into the conversation in German that he had with the numbers and everything. Oh boy, you want to be an ET contactee. Get ready for this. So he's transcribed over 24,000 pages with one hand in German. Information and teachings, 55 years of specific, prophetically accurate information, 6 categories of still irreproducible physical evidence. He allegedly writes the spiritual teaching for the Plejaren. Well, how can that be? Well, in this cosmology, and again, it's speculative, if the spirit form of Billy Meyer, Billy Edward Albert Meyer, Swiss farmer, is the same one as these other prophets who get tutored and brought up to speed by the Plejaren, but have this ancient form inside of them, it's a more ancient and advanced and knowledgeable essence than they. So Meyer, I don't have it on here, but I have to tell you this funny story. If I didn't tell it last year, starting about 3-4 years ago, when I would sit with Billy in the office, I would talk to him, and one day I looked over and I saw all these pieces of paper that were sticking out of the printer, right? And I look over and he says, oh, yes, I write the spirit teachings for the Plejaren. I go, Okay, and he says, but you know it's a big problem because Quetzal always has to come and beam into the office and go and take the paper and go back into his ship and go back to the Pleiades, and then they translate it and fix it up. I said, yeah. He says, so next week, Zafanat Paneak is coming. He's their computer specialist, and he knows how to fix my computer. So now I can type it out. It'll go to a separate server, to a little disk above the earth, and then it goes direct to the Pleiades, and Quetzal doesn't have to come and pick it up. And I went, uh-huh. So the year after that, 1 year later and change, I'm in the office with Billy, and there's a bunch of, I look over again, and I think, I said to him, Billy, and he says, oh, those papers, I write the spirit teaching for the Pleiades, and it's been a big problem. And he goes through the same story again. He says, but Zafanat Paneak came last year and he fixed my computer. So that's not for them anymore. That's for our thing here. Because now when I type it out, it goes to a separate server and it goes to a disk above the earth and it goes right back to the same story, right? Except the guy had already done it. And then he says, but there's another problem. And I said, well, what's the problem? He says, he screwed something up in my computer and he has to come back and fix that. So he's got an IT from outer space, right? So this last year in May, I thought, the guy can't remember the same made-up story 3 years in a row if it's a joke. So I'm with him and I said, so Billy, what about your computer? Did it ever get fixed? Oh yeah, I write the spirit. I swear to gosh, the same thing. He says, but now he adds this, he says, yeah, I just type in a code that gives me the separate server and it goes to the same story. We went to make some filming in September because we're doing this new documentary. And we get over there, and while Jack, my director friend, is there, I throw it at him again. Same exact thing. So I figure either the guy has got not only a rich fantasy life, but a photographic memory and can come up with the same piece of trivia and just knock it down each, or maybe he's telling the truth. Okay, and for his trouble of over 65 years of ongoing contacts with these people, there have been 21 documented assassination attempts. So with prophecies, why are we fascinated with these prophecies? They're like weather reports, except you can't change the weather. A prophecy is still changeable until it becomes a prediction. So why the inaction? Some inconvenient truth from Billy Meyer circa 1951. Al Gore, eat your heart out. Still, there's time to stop the monster that's prophesied for the future of the entire terrestrial humanity. Let me just hit the bullet points. He's talking about the fact that at least in 1951, countermeasures could be enacted to change things for the better if the scientists, the authorities, the governments, and the military were up to it. Otherwise, he says, if that doesn't happen, then unimagined horrors are imminent whereby, in every respect, the world power USA would lead the foremost front of the sword of death, as well as destruction and annihilation, while towing the line are Israel and all those countries who nestle in sanctimonious friendship with the USA, and indeed against the will of the sensible element of the respective peoples. Not only wars, terror, destruction, and annihilation, with all these deaths and destruction and all that, but a monstrous overpopulation will be to blame, as all natural laws will get thrown out of kilter. Through the guilt of the people, all storms will assume increasing and more violent forms, such as hailstorms, blizzards, flooding, rains, as however, also the ozone layer will become very seriously damaged. Remember I said in the 75 to 78 documents, Meyer referred back to stuff from 51 that I didn't have. Now we have it. Monstrous deluges will belong evermore to the order, come back there, of the day, because through the overpopulation, the forest, wetlands, and swampy plains will become altered in function to become residential areas whereby the wild waters of the flooding rain will find their way into the houses of the people because they can no longer escape into uninhabited wetland areas. Landslides and avalanches, as well as earthquakes and seaquakes, as well as every kind of storms will prevail. Gales and typhoons, hurricanes and tornadoes will increase. He spells it out. Overpopulation will bear the guilt and will thereby give rise to an unnatural climate change that in only 1 decade from today, 1951, will already begin to affect the world very detrimentally. The monstrous mass and weight of the cities and villages continuously stress the inner structure of the earth more and more, through which the tectonic plates will be adversely affected, inevitably leading to increasing tectonic displacements and faults, etc., earthquakes, etc. They're warning in 51, and Meyer sent this letter around to 3,000 different people around the world, and for his trouble he got nothing in return. He, in this letter, also speaks about that these tremors will influence the entire volcanic activity on the world, so that there'll be a worldwide activity because they're interconnected, and that especially in places that are unreasonable for habitation, according to Playard, such as places built too closely to volcanoes or beaches by oceans, rivers, and seas, that these shorelines and these locations will be inundated by storm waves and tsunamis, and the ever-growing overpopulation will only add to the problems, which will become insoluble. Famines increase, old illnesses will return. They even say that mass tourism, along with economic refugees, we call that today illegal immigration in any country in which it takes place. They're very much against that. They say it imbalances everything. You will have strife and wars. People have to bring their own populations up to the standard of living that they would like to have, not flee into countries to try to reap the fruits of the benefits of those countries. It's not good for either party. They never learn that way, and the system breaks down. Criminal gangs from so-called third world countries will spread out. This is another result of that type of overpopulation, illegal immigration, etc. We're talking about prophecies here. There's a point to all this. He also says, as far back as 51, terrorist extremism and neo-Nazism. The rise and spread of prostitution in unbelievable forms worldwide. The children will not be spared from it. We know that today. Prostitution will turn into a respectable occupation. What state are we in? Oh, I'm sorry. It will also be designated as taxable. Well, rest my case. Televisions, already invented, will belong to every family and as well to everyday life, as will the technology of the computer, which is already being worked on diligently in America, Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. The television and the computer will become the most important information media, however, also as significant forms for the public advertising of prostitution. This was sent around in 1951. Now, Meyer didn't say that the moon was going to leave its orbit on August 12, 2003, and there's life as we know it exists yet. This is more recent, from last year. The climate warms ever faster, whereby the snowfall is also absent ever more frequently in the deeper sites, while the Earth's polar ice masses as well as the glaciers melt ever faster, which leads to this. By the year 2100, in some cases, the water of the seas will rise up to 5'3". Forceful natural changes will become unstoppable. We're going to take a break for changing of the tapes, and this is not the Budweiser Bladder Invitational, so I think, shall we say 10 minutes? Does that work? Thank you. Raise your hand if you're here, would you? Okay, are we rolling? I guess. All righty. This disc, I'm rolling the wrong way. This was the last bit of information regarding the climate change, etc. I would say that Al Gore is really on the right track, and we're on the wrong track because he is. Now, in 1958, Meyer wrote, published, and sent around 25 copies of a letter of 160 specific predictions. Number 6 included the following. In Iraq, a war will be led through the United States of America through their country's president. However, this will be without success, for which reason one of his sons, who will likewise be the USA's head of power, will in the third millennium unleash a second war in Iraq, which will ultimately lead to an unbelievable disaster and to torturing as well as to mass murder through U.S. armed forces and the rebellious. Number 23, because of unrestricted prostitution, in about 25 years, an already embryonic, deadly epidemic will develop worldwide that will be named AIDS and will finally cost several hundred million lives. Here we have in 1958, through the madness of his overpopulation, the human has already detrimentally altered the world and the climate in such a way that a climatic warming becomes apparent that will be carried far into the third millennium and release monstrous natural catastrophes, et cetera, on environmental damage. 1958. Number 83 in this list. And it will be that the fanatical Islamists' bloody revenge on the distant descendants of the Christians for the earlier crucifixions by the Christians will come into being when they accomplish their deadly and destructive acts through irrepressible terror all over the world. This next one has to do with the threatening thunder that cracks over the earth due to the criminal national powers of the USA when it releases war into the wide world, and Israel's national forces spread just the same terror, murder, death, and corruption as the Palestinians themselves, from whom uncountable suicide bombers will go all over the world, etc. 85, organized murder and terror commandos will live secretly in cities worldwide and plan and carry out deadly attacks. It goes on and on about the environmental and terrorist and war consequences, the overpopulation related. So why are the prophecies being fulfilled? I call this the law of the pendulum. So let's pretend that this is a pendulum. Imagine that you see a pendulum. And what we have here has the word love written on it. Not bad. It goes out and it comes back. Likewise, hate, war, aggression. Now, what isn't known to most people, certainly not in our country, is that in the past 60 years, the U.S., its governments, have moved against people over 200 times, unprovoked attacks of aggression against other countries, other peoples, meaning everything from destabilizations, installations of dictators, raping the mineral rights and enforcing terror in a country in order to destabilize it, to outright attacks and bombing. Over 200 times in the past 60 years, not one of the countries that we aggressed against ever attacked us. They didn't initiate anything. It was judged to be in Americans' best interest. So we sent out this pendulum time and time again, and we never saw an immediate consequence to it. Nonetheless, in the past 60 years, wars, revolutions, uprisings, some fomented with the assistance of our or other secret services and military intelligences, have destabilized and upset things in the world. And then we get an attack on our soil, or we get a problem of people maybe who were on that country when this thing went out. Now they're hitching a ride back. Hey, that must be a neat place. They took everything we got. This isn't about being anti-American. If you're Russian or Chinese or German or anything else, French, British, and you've done that kind of thing, it's coming back in its own time. Cause and effect. So there is a really beautiful religious saying, right? Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So if we were truly a country that operated under the best of that Christian or Judeo-Christian tenet, which also has been said as a man or a person sows, thus shall they reap. What goes around, comes around is our kind of current version of it. Cause and effect, do unto others. Well, in this little cosmology with the law of the pendulum, environmentally, politically, socially, religiously, in every way, we're simply getting the dumb law of the universe returning opportunities to us to taste the experience that we sent out or had been sent out in our name. So really, what am I trying to prove? I said this a couple times before. And I'm trying to prove the prophecies in the Meyer case wrong. I want to prove the ultimate prophecies that are here. I want to prove them wrong. That's a much better thing to do than to just try to scare people with prophecies and predictions and tell us we're all doomed and look how bad we've been. But remember, we don't want to speak in sweet tones or in the saccharine language of diplomacy or New Age nonsense. When a thing is a thing, we better call it the thing that it is. We're in trouble. And it doesn't take an extraterrestrial or a one-armed farmer or any of us to know that that's the case. So how can we change things? Globally, we need a global approach. Strangely enough, there is a global approach. Now, you probably, again, won't be able to read all this from every position, so let me tell you, there's something that's called the Salome Peace Meditation. And this peace meditation was brought into our awareness maybe 15, 20 some years ago. It is said to be composed of words from the ancient Lyrian language that was spoken on earth 289,000 years ago, then again 13,500. It's speculative, this part, but this is the information and you can think through it. These were descendants of the various extraterrestrials that inhabited this planet for a short period. They claimed that by speaking or thinking, this sentence in unison as a group, certain impulses are released from the stored data banks known as the Akashic Records. These records envelop the earth, and every thought and every other impulse generated by any and all of the humans who've ever lived, currently live, or will ever live gets stored in this bank. We've heard about this from other teachings. Now, through the accumulation of stored unconscious impulses within every meditator, and because of the intensity they generate, they're done in conjunction with 3.5 billion extraterrestrials at the same time. This sets forth energy that can help to displace negative force fields and cover them and increasingly neutralize them. A lot of these force fields have been generated because of religion, blood sacrifice, wars, cults, sects, every imaginable thing, and our own ignorant thinking, right? This is a simple means that the Pleiadians say, this is one action that if a greater number of Earth humans would join in doing this once or twice a month, you would make an exponential effect energetically on your planet. So, does this look familiar? This is a symbol. Remember I told you that Meyer learned over 3.5 million different symbols. This is a symbol for peace. It's a tree of life, right? The energy goes up. You see the black and white structure in the middle. If you turn that upside down, that's our peace symbol. However, our peace symbol, according to this information, is a symbol of death. We are marching around for the past 30-odd years and putting bumper stickers and everything else on a symbol of death, the cross of Peter, etc., etc. There's information, you can read about this in detail and determine for yourself whether it makes sense to keep doing this symbol. However, if you turned your peace symbol upside down, this is a typical peace symbol. I've got another one here, a little nicer. This energy, as opposed to this energy, this is the sword down here, the hilt of the sword. This is the tree of life. We're being asked to consider, even just turn our peace symbols right side up. Look at it and see what it evokes in you. Compare it. Don't believe it. Work with it. See if there's something that happens for you. Maybe, maybe not. Now, I'm going to try to activate this without taking this off so you can hear how this is actually pronounced. Let's see. Don't know if it'll work on this. Oops, doesn't seem to want to play. I wanted you to be able to hear the actual pronunciation, so I'll do it for you. Salome Gamnan Ben Urda Ganiber Asala Hesporona. Peace be on earth and among all beings. Now I got a question for you, and this is free will here. Would you like to partake in an experiment in which I can guarantee you this number of people on earth have never done this before? Pronounce the words? Why not, right? So we'll take a couple minutes. We've got a little bit of time, if you're still awake. And I'll have to kick back to it when it jumps. So the first word is Salome. It's a long A. Salome. Salome, right? The next word is Gam. It's pretty simple, Gam. And the next word is Nan. Let's do those three words. Salome, Gamnan. Now the next word is Ben Urda. Yeah, almost like Ben-Hur, but Ben Urda. So it's Salome, Gamnan, Ben Urda. Let's get to the rest of it. This will jump here, maybe the same, but Ganiber, Ganiber, Asala, Hesporona. So let's try it together. Salome, Gamnan, Ben Urda, Ganiber, Asala, Hesporona. Now I'm going to ask this. I'll explain how this usually works. And if it dips off, I'll bring it back up. This is done for 20 minutes on the first and third Saturdays. Some people do it also on Sundays of every month. Some people do it once a month, one Saturday of the month for 20 minutes. And the times, it's all on the website. Again, it's something free you can do. Yes, there's a little pyramid that you can use and all that stuff, but don't worry about it if that doesn't float your boat. The intention, because as it says here, peace be on earth and among all beings, right? Is there anything wrong with that statement? Can we live with that? Though it's what the words mean. So it's not, I pledge allegiance. It's nothing like that. What's that?
Some idiot will find some fault at that.
Yes, there's always some way to find fault with plenty of ways to do that. So let's just try this a few times. If we can do this 10 times, and you just see if you can do it, and feel the vibration for yourself. All right, I'm going to try to lead it, and it goes like this. Salome, Gamnan, Ben Urda, Ganiber, Asala, Hesporona. 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 Salome, Gamnan, Ben Urda, Ganiba, Asala, Hesporona. Maybe that's short, but I don't want to keep you at it too long. When it's done in a group, each person can actually do it at their own rate of speed. There's a little CD they have in Switzerland, so you'll hear Salome Gamma, somebody Salome Gamma. They're just putting it out there. And if this mechanism actually helps us, far be it from me to not participate. Now, the Talmud of Emmanuel. This is the next segment here we're going to get into. I just want to say one thing about this whole Meyer case again, because there are people that still would say, oh, it's obviously a hoax. The one-armed guy fashioned all these little things by himself. Oh no, he had accomplices, even though in 8 years of on-site investigation, not one accomplice, not one detailed model, no explanation for the sounds and the 17 people that were present when Meyer recorded it, and they were analyzed in 3 different sound labs, and they're irreproducible to this day. No, it's got to be a hoax. So people should start to ask themselves what their vested interest is in thinking that the case is a hoax, and in swallowing hook, line, and sinker every other approach about so-called extraterrestrial contact that has, in my opinion, no content. This may be troubling content, but it ain't short of content. It's kind of like when you think of Atlantis. Don't you get that sinking feeling? Yeah, okay. All right. The Talmud Emmanuel, with the complete prophecies of Elijah and Jeremiah. So let me explain that we mentioned before Enoch. We have the Enoch or Henoch prophecies available on my website. They're also in the book, And Still They Fly. You can read them. The prophecies of Elijah and Jeremiah that are just being produced in English, for the first time, they are mind-boggling, as is the Talmud Emmanuel. The prophecies of Enoch, Elijah, and Jeremiah have been in the keeping of the Pleiaren ever since they were written or, expressed by the prophets, because most prophets were not their own scribes. They had scribes who wrote things down. They kept them, and they kept them for the reason that they would be expunged from the Bible. They would be altered. Different versions would come out that would be really nice and New Agey and feel good, but they wouldn't be the real deal according to this information. So this book comes out within a few weeks now, and it's the last translation of it, because the German translation is always has to be refined in terms of the meanings of the words. I should point out to you here, this is Meyer when he's about 26. This is a man named Issa Rashid and a friend and his daughter. Issa Rashid is a pivotal person in this whole case. He was an ex-Greek Orthodox priest who, along with Meyer, co-discovered in 1963 4 animal skin-wrapped, resin-encrusted scrolls, series of scrolls written in Aramaic. Issa Rashid coincidentally just happened to not only read Aramaic, but spoke and read German. Meyer and he were allegedly led telepathically to this area where there was like a little hillside. There was a small hole that was discernible, and they were being led to this, so they dug it out. They went in with their flashlights, and they found what was a very ancient tomb, stones on the floor of the tomb. They dug around, they opened, they pulled stones up and found the scrolls underneath, along with several other artifacts that were, quote-unquote, meant for Meyer. This was on the outskirts of Jerusalem in an old tomb. We'll start to put the pieces together here if they already aren't very obvious. In 1970, the first translation of about a third of this document was sent to Meyer by Issa Rashid. Shortly thereafter, he and his family fled into Lebanon to a refugee village because people had found out, he lived in Jerusalem, they found out that he was in possession of some very important scrolls. And both Christian and Jewish interests were not happy about this and wanted to take possession of the scrolls. He sequestered these scrolls in a building in which they took refuge in this village. And within about a week's time, the Israelis had come into this village as an attack and leveled that particular village. There actually are newspaper clippings that support the attack of this village. Issa Rashid and his family escaped with their lives. The scrolls were lost, either taken into the possession of the Israelis or burned in the attack. They don't know for sure. Now, they get published by Meyer in German in 1978. They attract the attention of a man named James Deardorff, who says, aha, another Bible hoax, let me at it. James Deardorff is a retired professor from Oregon State, I think meteorology, comparative religions, various areas in which he had his fields of interest and expertise. He then discovers, after over a year of analyzing and comparing, that the Talmud Emmanuel resolves over 335 inconsistencies in the book of Matthew, 100 or more of which were not even known about or discussed until after not only the discovery, but the publication in German of the document. One of the amazing things in here is that he determines that the book of Matthew is a derivation of the Talmud Emmanuel, not the other way around. And that the book of Matthew is written approximately 120 AD, according to some information. This could be wrong. I'm not exactly sure what's agreed on there. But what's very interesting is that Judas Iscariot in the Talmud Emmanuel is not Emmanuel, a.k.a. Jesus' betrayer. He's his trusted scribe and friend. We learn from this, we learned in the Meyer material, that Emmanuel was conceived at the behest of the God, the Ishwish of the time, who was not the God of the Old Testament. He was not at that time and in this region Jehovah or Kamagal, but he was another god named Pharaohs. And the Pleiadian father was indeed a Pleiadian human named Gabriel, as we are familiar with from the New Testament. Emmanuel then is the fifth prophet in this specific lineage, as I mentioned before, and it is said that he survived the crucifixion and traveled with his family and Judas to India. He went through other countries on the way, preaching and getting thrown out of those countries as well. The god of the time of his adult life was named Calatan, not Pharaohs, because Pharaohs had done his bit for having Emmanuel procreated and then went back to the Pleiades star system where they'd already been living in peace for 40,000 plus years and change, and they were leaving another prophet here to try to get us straight. Good luck. Remember, these are human beings, and there's an axiom that I have, and it goes like this. Wherever and whenever human beings are involved, things can and ultimately will get screwed up. This is no exception. According to Meyer, and I asked this of him, he did not marry Mary Magdalene. She was, quote unquote, a woman friend, but he did marry an Indian woman after his mother had died. I think his mother died when he was 38, according to the story around the Talmud. And he and his wife married, procreated numerous descendants, quote unquote, one of whom was a son named Joseph. And after Emmanuel died between 105 and 120 and is buried near Srinagar, his son took the Talmud Emmanuel scrolls, the 4 scrolls, as Emmanuel had dictated to him to do, and went into Jerusalem, where now nobody is going to remember a non-existent son who's not going to say, hi, my dad was nailed up here, nothing like that. So he goes to where the tomb is, secures, hides the scrolls, where they are intended to rest for nearly 2,000 years. Now, Emmanuel, in the Talmud, foretells the coming of the next prophet by name, and that he will also be a true prophet whose teachings, like his own, like Emmanuel's own, will be falsified and made into cults and will evolve into a fanatical, dangerous cult. Now, Emmanuel, remember, the Jesus of the Bible is speaking to the Hebrews and Israelites, the scribes, the Pharisees, etc., right? I'm not a Bible scholar, so he's excoriating those people at the time. Those people in the temples, those people in the countryside, wherever he found people who he felt were being heretical and not true to spiritual teaching. And he said to the Israelites of the time, my own distant forefathers, I presume, because you have stolen these lands from the rightful owners, because you have burned and taken that which was not your own and deprived these people of their land, in 5 centuries comes another man, a true prophet too. And he will attract followers as I will under a false name, and his followers will give your descendants no peace until the end of time, unless your distant descendants make a true and just peace with the distant descendants of the rightful owners of these lands. He says that in the future, human beings of the future time are going to build these vehicles that can travel on the earth and on the water and in the skies, that they're going to fight with each other by creating metallic projectiles. They're going to fill them with the deadly cornerstones of life and deadly foul air, atomic, biological, chemical weapons. This was discovered in 63 and published the first time in 78. Okay. Then he mentions that human beings and their lust and greed for power are going to ignite the very oil of the earth and darken the skies, and soot will fall all over. Does anybody remember something like that happening? How about 1990, the Kuwaiti oil fires? Now look, here's a document that we can say, well, we can't prove it was discovered in 1963, but we can prove it was published in 78. Okay, atomic biological missiles, well, maybe someone could figure that out. Now we've got the darkened skies from the oil fires. Then he goes on and talks about a coming destruction of Jerusalem that reads very much like a nuclear attack. And of course, as I already said, again, he says, this is avoidable if Israel will make a true and just peace with the people that will no longer be on their ancestors' land. He says then that there is a danger of a new worldwide war. But simultaneously, while these terrible crises are coming to the fore during this time, the true teachings will again be presented to the world. And that they're not his teachings. They are the true eternal teachings of creation as have been presented before and ignored, corrupted, redacted, edited, eliminated from each of the prophets that preceded him. And he says that he will return, or his spirit, a new personality, will come again during that time to announce the celestial sons, meaning the people that would come from the heavens. Yeah? We okay there so far? I mean, that's even kind of hinted at, I think, in the New Testament. He says that the new prophet is going to live in a northern country. He's not going to have as much power over health and illness and all as he, Emmanuel, would have. But the eternal teachings will be revealed anew through this man and spread throughout the world in small groups over time until the truth is known to everyone on earth. But that time is going to take several centuries, up to 700 to 800 years past this time, before we've straightened ourselves out, unless we decide that we would like to get at it a little quicker. Now, in Srinagar, India, at the base of a tomb there, I think it's called Isa's tomb or something like that, are the impressions, the markings of 2 human feet with marks in the center of the feet, somewhere in here, of nails of a man who had been crucified. And I don't have the exact wording, but I think there's a legend that goes along with this. Here lies a great teacher who was, crucified in his country and came here to teach us something. There's also the tomb of Mary somewhere to be found, the mother of Emmanuel. Now, is this a new religion? Is that what everybody's being set up for? Is that what the Billy Meyer case is about? Well, remember, no. Illogical premise, what's in this book is true because the book says it's true. Now, remember I said that the Talmud Emmanuel was destroyed or is no longer in Meyer's possession, the original, right? Well, this really irks people. Well, we don't have an original. And I thought about it a lot. And I thought, well, even the Bibles were composed and compiled and all that and edited decades, centuries after the original events may have occurred. There's something brilliant here. If we're trying to get away from this, what's in this book is true, the last thing we need is another precious ancient relic to go, look, it's in the book, so it's got to be true. It's the truth. Billy Meyer's telling the truth. The teachings of Emmanuel. Let's worship Emmanuel or Billy or whatever. Big mistake. So I think, and I've always thought this, the Plejaren people, if these are real beings, and you notice I've never said they are real, I've said alleged every time, because I can't prove their existence. I think I can make the best case for it. But if they are existing, and if those are their spaceships, and if they really can travel through space and possibly through time, they allegedly took Meyer back to meet Emmanuel. That's pretty mind-blowing. That's in the film. You'll hear about that. If that's true, I hope that indicates that they are a few curves ahead of us on the road, and they might have come to some position to say, well, let's let the thing get crisped. And somebody says, well, there won't be an original left. And somebody else says, great. No more worship of books. We're trying to get people out of the age of beliefs and into the age of knowledge. Let's make sure that they can't lock onto another thing, because we're leaving the age of beliefs for the age of knowledge. Knowledge and wisdom require experience and thinking, not turning our power over to other relics, books, etc. It's an inside job. And you are the authority in your life. So consider and think about this. The Talmud Emmanuel is here and being introduced to help undo the presumed lies of the last 2,000 years. And that's going to hit a lot of people. Just to hear that, that's going to make some funny stuff. And we have a workshop that you might want to hang out for. Emmanuel, you will be misunderstood and denounced because Earth humans are still ignorant and addicted to delusionary beliefs. They believe that God is creation itself and not the ruler of the celestial sons and these human lineages. Earth people attribute to him the omnipotence of creation and glorify him as creation itself. Maybe they're talking about Caladan at that point. But God is a terrestrial human being like all the celestial sons and the terrestrial humans, except that he is vastly greater in consciousness than they are. Creation, however, is of immeasurably higher standing than God, the Lord over the celestial sons and terrestrial humans, because creation is the immeasurable enigma. Emmanuel, you will also be slandered as God and his only begotten Son, and you too will be equated with the mysterious creation. Do not heed these false teachings, however, because millennia will pass before the people of these human lineages are capable of recognizing the truth, and much human blood will be shed because of you, including your own and that of countless generations. Notwithstanding, fulfill your mission as the King of Wisdom, as the son of Gabriel, the celestial son. The law for your creation was issued in the name of God, so that you may serve as prophet and pioneer of wise knowledge for these human lineages. Fulfill your mission unperturbed by the irrationality and all false teachings of the scribes and Pharisees, and despite the disbelieving people. Hence, following the fulfillment of your mission, centuries and 2 millennia will pass before the truth of the knowledge you brought to the people will be recognized and disseminated by a few humans. Not until the time of space-traveling machines will the truth break through and gradually shake the false teachings that you are the Son of God or creation. And this will be the time when we, celestial sons, begin to reveal ourselves anew to earth humans, when they will have become knowing and will threaten the structure of the heavens with their acquired powers. Now look, here is the alleged original Lord's Prayer. I'll read it to you. It'll be available on this DVD, and it's in the Talmud too. He says, when you pray, you shall call upon the omnipotence of the Spirit and not babble misleading nonsense like the idol worshippers, the ignorant and the selfish, because they think they are heard when they use many words. The creation spirit part of the human has no need for many words. However, humans need the knowledge of how powerful it is. Therefore, pray to the omnipotence of the Spirit in the knowledge that its greatness and power are infinite. If you do not know how to pray directly to the almighty power of the Spirit, make use of something sacred by which you can reach the Spirit. But be never like the ignorant, the hypocrites, the idol worshippers, and the selfish who worship something sacred in the belief that the omnipotence of the Spirit dwells within it, including in books and texts, etc. Be aware, however, that the almighty power of the Spirit always dwells within you, regardless of your usage of a sacred object or place. Therefore, pray as one who knows. My Spirit, you exist within omnipotence. May your name be holy. May your kingdom incarnate itself within me. May your power unfold itself within me, on earth and in the heavens. Give me today my daily bread, that I may recognize my wrongdoings and the truth. And lead me not into temptation and confusion, but deliver me from error. For yours is the kingdom within me, and the power and the knowledge forever. Amen. When you pray to your Spirit, it will give you what you request. Have trust in this knowledge, and you will receive. However, if you believe in the false teachings that the power and Spirit do not dwell within you, then you will be without knowledge and will live in spiritual poverty. That's enough of that for right now. You can always read it in the book if you want and think through it. But it's a very different perspective. And Emmanuel said, truly, I have not come to bring peace, but the sword of knowledge about the power of the Spirit which dwells within humans. Therefore, while we may be at a UFO and ET conference and everything else, and things are fascinating that appear in the sky or wherever, it is about us. That is what the Meyer case is about. So there are also, and I'm not going to read all of this to you because it would really put you to sleep, although it should ultimately awaken you when you read it on your own. But this was from a contact with Semyaze that Meyer had early on, the 10th contact, and she starts off, the human bears a spirit that does not die nor sleep during the deepest sleep. Every human has his own spirit, creation, truth, knowledge, imperishable life, etc. That's what all of the prophets, all of them, were trying to bring to us. But as soon as that my mother told me a story many years ago, and I didn't get it at the time. I don't know if you'll get it now. There were two guys walking down the street. One of them's a regular guy, and one of them's the devil. They're following somebody in front of him. And as this guy's walking, he suddenly bends down, he picks something up, and he's happy and ecstatic, and he clutches it to his chest. The devil starts bouncing up and down with joy and glee. And the guy next to him says, hey, excuse me, what are you so happy about? The devil stops bouncing for him, and he says, he just discovered the truth. So the guy says, well, wait a minute. It sounds like you're out of business. If he discovered the truth, what are you so excited about? He says, I'm going to help him organize it. So all of this contact, this is a beautiful, it goes on for like 200 sentences, and it's probably the most inspirational thing I've ever read because it just keeps on reflecting you back internally
to then that which created all things and sustains everything and our connection to it. There's no fear, there's no threats, there's no God taking side in football games or wars. There's nobody saying if you don't do this and look that way, you're going, I'm going to be dipping you forever in a molten lake. There's no harps to play. It's like there's another picture. So as I say, this goes on for some time and it's quite beautiful. The Spirit is the wonder of all wonders, and all power emerges from it. Again, from the Talmud, so it will come true in 2 times 1,000 years when humans have become knowledgeable. My actual unfalsified teachings revealed anew. The new prophet of that distant future will not possess as much strength and power over evil and sickness, but his knowledge will surpass mine, and his revelations about my real teachings will shake the foundations of the entire earth. For in his time, the world will be inundated by my teachings as falsified by the distorters of the scriptures, and it will be living in false religious cults that bring death. It will be a time when wars from space begin to threaten, and many new gods will seek to rule over the earth. Truly, truly, I say to you, the new prophet will be persecuted not only by a wrong-minded people, as will happen to me, but also by the whole world and by many deluded religious cults which will bring forth many false prophets. Yet before the end of 2 times 1,000 years, the new prophet will reveal my unfalsified teachings to small groups. He says, just as he teaches them. Nevertheless, his path will be very difficult and full of obstacles, because he will begin his mission in a peace-loving country in the north, which will be dominated, however, by a strict and false religious cult based upon scriptural distortions of my teachings. Thus I prophesy, and thus it shall be. And this, remember I said, Emmanuel prophesies the destruction of Jerusalem as well. When the land seized by the Israelites is attacked, people shouldn't go back and get things. Pregnant women will suffer. They will construct machines of metal. This is all in the Talmud, where you can read this for yourself. Mighty nations, if they say when the war time would come, if we allow that, if at that time mighty nations were not to intervene as once did the celestial sons, to bring a halt to the unrestrained madness and deadly conduct of demented dictators. Can you think of any? Truly, I say to you, I tell you, no human being would survive. He talks about the huge population at that time and says this is what the law ordains, because people have violated it and will continue to violate it into the distant future. This was the quote where he talks about the makeup of the earth, sky, and air will be disturbed, and the land will burn because of the black oil of the earth, ignited by people's craving for power. Now, he says here, the sky will darken and rage for 1,000 days. That didn't turn out to be true, or they're going to do it again, I hope not. But this is, 2,000 years in advance, you get it off. You hit the big ones, but you miss the duration. I don't know. Figure it out for yourself. And as he says, creation alone stands far above all humankind, and it alone deserves honor and praise, just as it renders honor and praise to the absolute power above it. Emmanuel in his time is saying, we live in a universe, a creation, and there are creations above and beyond it. This is evolution. And yet, if you look at the Meyer case, they debunk Darwinian evolution. That's another story. We have that on the website. And that people must not put God, the terrestrial ruler, above the creation. Since I will certainly return at that time, I will let them recognize me. This is as the law and destiny ordain it, and so it shall be. But remember, this is the most important slide within the context of the Meyer case and what we're leading to here. No deification, no worship, no exaltation, no adoration. A little respect for a job that's very thankless. For as lightning flashes and illuminates from start to finish, so will be my coming in the future, when I will bring the teachings anew and announce the legions of the celestial sons. At that time I will have a renewed life and will again be accused of deception and blasphemy across the entire world, until the teachings of truth will bring about insight, change in the people. And this time the prophet will type his own teachings, and he will ride with the celestial sons and will take photographs from inside one of the craft, of the other craft, outside, to fulfill that part of the prophecy. And then he will type the prophecies and the teachings for this time himself after losing his arm in a bus accident that he was warned about 10 years in advance. And we will bring you, by the summer of this year, a fairly complete new film that we want you to see a little bit of now.
Wir sind hier auf der Erde, unser Leben zu führen.
We are here on Earth to live our lives so that the consciousness can evolve, so it can collect knowledge and wisdom, build love, freedom, and harmony, so that the human can learn he stands here in the material life on Earth, exactly as other human civilizations do on other worlds and in the entire universe.
Welten im gesamten Universum dasselbe tun.
Nein, ich kann das allein, ich bin kein Baby mehr.
Mein Name ist Eduard Albert Meyer.
My name is Edward Albert Meyer, but around the world I'm simply known as Billy. I received this name when I was in Tehran on my journeys. Since then, this name has remained with me.
Und seither ist mir dieser Name geblieben. Hier ein Andenken, dass man...
Here's a souvenir that they had nailed onto the main door to my home. It's enough, you dog, you will be put down. Shortly after they had nailed this letter to my...
Oops. Sorry, folks. I'll talk over this to that point. I'm afraid the thing dims automatically. This is an entire documentary on the life of Meyer, people who know him, around him. It's not going to be just a love affair. We have interviews with religious leaders and skeptics and people who oppose the ideas that are promulgated in the case. We have the controversy of Meyer's wife. Many people know that she is a detractor of the case.
We are here on Earth to live
We
our
have
lives
film of her
so that the
in the 1970s endorsing and talking about her own sightings. So allow me just to talk about this for a second and we'll come back to it. So I want you to just see this little bit of the beginning and know that this is going to be nearly 2 hours on the Meyer case and all the information that we can put in it.
Im gesamten Universum dasselbe tun.
Nein, ich kann das allein, ich bin kein Baby mehr.
Mein Name ist Eduard Albert Meyer.
My name is Edward Albert Meyer, but around the world I'm simply known as Billy. I received this name when I was in Tehran on my journeys. Since then, this name has remained with me.
Und seither ist mir dieser Name geblieben. Hier ein Andenken, dass man...
Here's a souvenir that they had nailed onto the main door to my home. It's enough, you dog, you will be put down. Shortly after they had nailed this letter to my door, there was another
an
attempt,
die Türe genagelt war, hat es dann einige Tage später
and they tried again to catapult me out of my life and shot at me.
aus dem Leben befördern wollen und hat auf mich geschossen. Und hier ist der Platz, als ich einmal...
And here's the place that I once was told to come for a contact. Jacobus was here with me and 2 other men in the late night hours. They shot at me from down there.
Da hat man von hier drunten hat man auf mich geschossen. Das habe ich aber Tage zuvor...
But I had dreamt about this days before and had hung a metal plate in front of my chest under the jacket and an agenda. And the shot went into the agenda and into the metal plate.
Dann genau in die Agenda rein und in die Metallplatte und so hat es mir das Leben gerettet. Durch einen Traum, den ich zuvor hatte.
And so my life was saved through the dream I had. Because I always and always have dreams which show me events that will come true in the future.
Can we all have dreams like that?
es können eigentlich alle Menschen...
Actually, all humans can have these kinds of dreams if they concentrate and start to steer their dreams. And when they make themselves somehow capable to have visions through their dreams, they will have truth dreams, and so on and so forth.
Irgendwie durch die Träume eben Visionen.
But it depends naturally upon the human concentrating hard and using his consciousness to truly direct the energies and powers that come out of the
Der
consciousness.
Mensch sehr konzentriert sein Bewusstsein dazu benutzt, nach der linken Seite hierauf.
Up to the left side over here where the road goes into the forest, Langholz is situated there, and that also has gotten us great photographs.
Where are we going now, Billy?
Down there to the lower Satellite, where we are able to make photographs of Semjase's beam ship.
Hier machen konnten mit dem Strahlschiff von Semjase.
That's the trailer. Thank you. You saw the roads he was walking down there? Many people here, you've seen the photographs in the books, right? And it's so easy for the skeptics and the debunkers to say, well, he's hanging models. Walk those roads, up and down those. That was one of the easy locations. And you saw the photograph taken over a log pile that was there. You try to figure out how a one-armed man, even with a crew of elves, would get out there and take 1,200 photographs, clear photos, 8 films, a video, etc., and fool people for 30 years with it. It's mind-boggling. And we just hope that we'll present both sides. We're going to have a skeptic in there explaining how it was all hoax, too. So it'll be interesting. So do you really think that this is all still about extraterrestrials, UFOs, gods, exopolitics and ascension and angels and masters and gurus and cults and saints and etc.? Or is it really about us and about this? Truly, I've not come to bring peace, but the sword of knowledge about the power of the Spirit which dwells within humans. I was looking for somebody to believe in, someone who'd save the day when things go wrong, someone who'd live and die for all the things I only cry for, someone who'd change my life, change it with a song. And I was looking for someone with all the answers, someone who'd show me how to play the game, to be stronger than the madness, all the anger, or stronger than the sadness, all the anger and the madness. But how long can I hide the one I'm trying to find? I'll be my own hero. I'll make my own magic. I'll change the endings that used to be tragic. I'll be all I am without armor or mask. I'll be my own hero at last. Now I don't need someone to come and save me and tell me how my life's supposed to be. I keep on taking chances, finding my own answers. Love's the only savior I will ever need. And I'll be my own hero. I'll make my own magic. I'll change the endings that used to be tragic. And all through my life, I'll let love lead me on. I'll be my own hero. I'll sing my own song. Thank you. Thank you. We talk now about an individual approach. And that's where we come to the standing in spirit part, which is a workshop. And I'm going to give you the option because we just would roll right into it. If anybody here doesn't want to participate, whatever reason, we'll give a minute or two for those that feel they don't want to go through this. Anybody that wants to go through it, it won't be an ordeal. It's fairly direct and to the point, but use your own discretion, your own tolerance, your own bladder, whatever it may be, okay? So let me just say a little bit about this, and if you're leaving, we'll understand. I think in the beginning I showed you my little resume and I said I created this in 1990. And recently, Meyer and the people in Switzerland have asked that I do this workshop at the end of every lecture so that we're not just focused on all this stuff, phenomenon, text, everything else, but we find And many of you may already have a good way. This is another way to make the internal connection. Remember, wisdom is the greatest asset of humanity, and so is the created will, which is Lord over love and happiness. But all of this is meaningless without the power of the Spirit. And the last quote before we get into this. There is no higher happiness than wisdom, no better friend than knowledge, and no other Savior than the power of the Spirit. So I'm not really big on affirmations, and naturally, shortly after I'd come up with this process, woke up in the middle of the night and had to write this thing out. I've revised it a little, but what the heck. By the love, power, wisdom, force, and will of my consciousness, I disconnect, complete, forgive, and release these limiting patterns, influences, behaviors, and beliefs. I remove and replace them with the positive, loving qualities of my own consciousness and spirit. Now, what I should say is this. That's our operating principle. That's our context. That is not to say that what we're going to do is say affirmations over things inside of us that are not true, which is why I don't particularly like affirmations per se. What we're going to do, those of us that participate, and this is a silent, basic, personal participation, we're going to, if you agree, let the operating principle be as such, that it is our consciousness and the qualities, the positive and loving qualities of our own consciousness and spirit that will guide us, and we will then recognize that only that which we are ready to receive and perceive from within ourselves, brought to us by our own higher level of inner awareness. No angels, no guides, gods, facilitators. I'm just kind of here to make noises so you go through some steps. But it is your inner awareness that is your guide. Neutral positive thinking is a teaching of the Pleyar and Meyer material. And it means that we first have to discover what is, whether we like it or not. I sometimes say that a negative aspect of America, not a positive one, there are positive ones, is our allergic reaction to things we don't like, what we don't want to hear about, we don't like that they exist, they inconvenience us. In our personal lives, we have the opportunity to mature our perceptions beyond like and dislike and let what we don't like or what's uncomfortable to us present itself with our inner consciousness being our own guide, that we may then accept the reality of that non-preferred state and process it and come to remove and replace with the positive, loving qualities of consciousness and spirit. So the way this works is, and we'll go through it in a moment, I'm just kind of giving you the ground rules. We first identify an inner conflict, a dissonance, something we want to change, a fear, whatever. We take a look within, we sense it, we feel it, we get the images, the thoughts, the emotions and feelings, and we locate them. We get a sense of where they reside in us, because our emotional content usually, and mental content also has location. And a lot of this is familiar to people if you meditate or have done some other processes. What we're going to do is we're going to observe, and breath by breath, we're going to receive what is, and we're going to allow consciousness to take it and to let it go. We're going to not struggle against it. We're not going to want to defend or negotiate or judge against ourselves. But we probably will at some point or other. So when we notice that, that's the thing we're working on. Are you understanding this so far, or is it too mental? A little each? You getting it? Okay. So if I have something that I'm upset about, and this is how this thing came about for me. I had a relationship that went south, and really bad, way south. And I had a big knot in my stomach about it, and I was doing some standing qigong, and suddenly the voice popped in my head and said, ask your spirit to show you the core of the pattern. And I said, okay, yeah, whatever. And suddenly I'm reliving my childhood with my father. It had nothing to do with my mother or another girlfriend. And I'm in this big emotional discomfort while I'd become fairly still just standing there. But also I was observing and feeling at the same time. And bombs were going off, and I was seeing red. I really understood that idea. And I was inside just on fire about all this. And this was going on, and I was receiving it and looking at it, and some of it I was seeming to analyze, other parts were just coming and going, and then suddenly it was gone. And I thought, well, what difference did that make? And this little voice pops back in and says, think about your father again. And I went, yeah, that was my old man. What's the big... I went, wait a minute. Where's the nut? And then think about her. I went, yeah, nice girl. What's the problem here? And I went, wow, what is this? So every day for 2 weeks I came back to class and I would pick on myself. I'd find something to stimulate my internal grief about. And just do this process of following it and breathing with it and observing and not trying to overly analyze, but analysis can be a part of it. Anyhow, my point here is this, that we're going to focus not on yogic breathing or anything special. We're just not going to hold our breath. We're going to let what comes up be there, and we're going to, when the breath comes in, we receive it. When the breath goes out, we release that breath in that moment. It may change, it may not change, it may dissipate, etc. You're going to be your own workshop for this. I'm just going through the drill here. So the experience is within you, and this isn't about screaming and crying and doing primal therapy. It's really about awareness and how the consciousness brings us that which we're ready to experience at any time that we will still ourselves enough. Now, let me just see what our next slide is here. Okay. So what I'm going to say to you, and don't worry about the slide part of it, we'll just do this at this point. So just make yourself as reasonably comfortable as you can. Basically uncross yourself if you are comfortable sitting 2 feet on the floor, and you can have your hands in your lap. Just don't do any of this stuff because it's a little restricting. And what you're going to do in a moment, and this is my last part of talking it through, is you're going to find something that you'd like to work on in the privacy of your own consciousness that you don't have to tell me or any other person about, even though I'm going to talk to you about some stuff. So we're going to take about a minute. As I'm talking to you, just find some issue. You can close your eyes for this. You can leave them open, whatever you're comfortable with. Something that's issue for you. And if it's the first thing that comes up, take it, because maybe it'll be something you can work with here in this process. And just find something. And if you have nothing at all that bothers you, congratulations. Make something up. I don't know. Okay. We've already agreed, and you can keep your eyes open or closed here. You can actually ignore me if you want. I'm going to try to just lead you along. We've agreed that our inner wisdom is the guide. I'm going to ask you to put your attention on this original situation, this issue, this thing right now that you want to get in touch with to improve in some way. I want you to know that your consciousness is going to do the work, and you have to simply be attentive. Observe yourself. Be patient and forgiving with yourself, and we're not worried about perfection. We're just doing a little piece of work. I want you to focus on the part of your body, your entire body and being, where your attention may be drawn related to this situation, this issue. And all I want you to do right now is I want you to breathe in and out and continue to do that for many decades to come, but just while we're here, stay with it. And I want you to try to keep this issue in the forefront of your inner awareness. Some people see pictures or movies, some don't. Some just have an idea, a feeling, a sound, a memory. Whatever is true for you, I want you to be with that issue now. I simply want you to do breath by breath. Let it come and let the breath go, and just be there for whatever is. There may be nothing, something, a lot, a little. We're just taking our first step into this process. Breathe, observe, feel. Stay present with and for yourself, for no one else. We'll only take another 10, 20 seconds just for this so you can just observe. Follow, breathe. Breath by breath, just take a little time. And don't worry, This can always be shown to you at yet another time, and you'll get it. Now, just notice for yourself. Bring up this idea of reintroducing the thing you were working with, and we're doing a kind of compressed version of this, albeit. Just bring up that situation and notice it again and see if it resides in the same place inside of you, with the same intensity, more or less. And if you are willing, if it's not uncomfortable for you, see if you can provoke it a little more. Enrich the picture. Throw some more on the fire here. Bring up another image or an association inside yourself. And allow expectation to not be the important part. Allow your willingness to receive yourself, breath by breath. There is no wrong way to do this. Just be with yourself. And just spend a few more seconds. We're going to do that again. And we'll talk about some other parts of this. And I'm not meaning to rush it, but out of respect for the willingness to stay this long, we're introducing this, and I can answer questions about it later. Now I'm going to ask you to just kind of come to and open your eyes and assess for yourself. In this only couple minutes, truly, that we did this, and there are ways to work with it longer. Just assess for yourself your own experience, which I'm not trying to put any limits or size on. How did you feel about being perhaps uncomfortable? Yeah, how did you feel about being uncomfortable? Did you resist, deny, judge, get impatient? Were you able to stay focused? Did something change? Did you get an insight? Did you get the sense that you are capable, through an internal richness, a capacity that may not have yet been fully tapped, to develop and to grow and to connect in ways that maybe have not been that which we've been taught externally? Again, this is a couple short minutes here. Here's how you can know when this method or any other method that you work with for your own personal growth actually works for you. This is one of the tests. In a longer session, like when I would do groups of people or do individual sessions for up to a half hour or whatever, sometimes you get these wonderful, great ahas, and we finally clear this thing, and I don't feel it in my body. I said, great, 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 wonderful. Now, here's how you're going to know if it really made a difference. This situation, this memory, this incident, this external or internal, will arise or come again into your life. You can almost guarantee it, right? That we don't fully eliminate and totally rid ourselves of every issue in our lives and every trauma. But what we do is we develop through, this is like pulling the curtain away. The more you do this kind of approach, you pull the curtain away on the Wizard of Oz. Because, and this was from my own discovery, the wizard has run us for a long time with whatever these internal issues are. It goes boo, and we go into habitual. We shut down, we react habitually. That's what neurotic behavior is. The same response to stimuli, to things that have no relation to our original traumas. And we're not going to get into a big psychological discovery or discussion. But when we are willing to receive, whether we like it or not, what is present for us, and we can breathe, we can respire through it, and we go, oh, really? Okay, give me your best shot. And it goes kaboom. And you go, well, give me your best shot. And it goes kaboom. We get at a certain point, and it may or may not happen after 3 minutes of introducing the idea, that is it, folks. That energy that puts us into our contraction, our fear, our shutdown, or whatever, that is all it takes to do it, because it's all it ever needed to take from the earliest point of our life, and we would cooperate and habitually go shut down in fear, whatever. When we are face to face with that wizard and we've pulled the curtain aside and it's going boo, at first it hurts. It makes us uncomfortable. We want to run and deny and judge and get away from it. And so we come back knowing that our inner wisdom is not going to give us anything we cannot handle. We go back. We say, okay, well, give me the best shot. And after a while, that knot, that mass, that congealed thing, whatever you saw or felt or sensed, starts to dissipate as it does in any dream when you focus on it. Not because I'm trying to say, I'm a lovable, wonderful person, I'm rich, I want the... You know, rich people don't have affirmations in the refrigerator saying, I'm a wealthy person. They know they're wealthy people. They got other things going on. And people that are healed of this issue or that, they don't have to put that up there either. So even the operating principles, just to acknowledge for ourselves, we have this inner consciousness ever developing. It is the miracle, the wisdom within, the spirit, the way it feeds our consciousness, all this stuff that we can learn about. And so if we will be curious like kids, you know, when children get curious about stuff, they're not in fear. There's that, isn't it a biblical saying, perfect love casteth out all fear? So love is understanding too. It is not necessarily to believe or to act or feel. It's to understand, to receive, to support that which is the best thing. When we do it for others, we love others. When we do it for ourselves, we're truly loving ourselves. So this is not about you have to follow anybody. The gift is to be reminded that you can trust your inner wisdom. When you have something, and no matter how long standing, you will not be overwhelmed. When you ask your own inner wisdom, your consciousness, if you want, your spirit, to guide and give you that which you're ready to receive and perceive. And sometimes, you know what? You get nothing. And sometimes nothing changes. And sometimes there are ahas. There can be all sorts of stuff, and I'm not going to make suggestions to you so that this is not a hypnosis session. This is for you to find out. And I really invite you to know that one of the ways of testing it, therefore, is when the external stimuli appears or reappears, do you have no choice over your behavior and you do the same thing? It's okay if you're aware of it. And I've been there, and I still go there sometimes with certain issues. Something stimulates it, and I'm back in my jive, but I know I'm doing it. When I'm in my next better self, I do anything but my regular song and dance when that thing is said to me or when I come in contact with that particular person that still has my button or whatever. But I know I'm doing it, and when I know that a degree of mastery has occurred is when I go, okay, I'm not doing that. I think I'm going to do a specific other thing. I have choice. And this is the difference between being in fear of external authorities and gods and priests that are going to tell us things, and knowing from within, we choose. We are the authority in life. And this is not, and I'm not trying to negate it, it's not the easiest thing for most people in this world at this time. Some people, yes, it's easy for. And it's not always easy for me. So the key to conscious and deliberate progress is the observation of our thoughts 24 hours a day. We choose. As we observe our thoughts, we notice what we're thinking and what we're perpetuating. So if we don't like that world out there, that relationship, we listen as we see the thought, as we hear the thought, as we feel it, we can say no thank you. Some people go uncreate that, not preferred, whatever. We replace it with a thought of our choosing. But we first have to acknowledge it. That's coming right back to what is. So we take back the power from the external source. This is our work. When the teachings are to be spread anew, quote unquote, sorry folks, it has nothing to do with that the teachings are that extraterrestrials are coming and that we have them walking among us and they're in the supermarkets and we're going to be on ships and I'm channeling this one. It's much more universally true. These extraterrestrials in this case, they meditate, they do their own work, and they make their mistakes to this day. And there's some famous ones in this case. So this isn't about perfection. It's about the process and the progress. When we think for ourselves, we do rediscover this immense and liberating power of true knowledge and timeless wisdom. That's the gift of life. Not the ETs, not the prophets. It's the gift of life, of the creation, of the spirit. It takes a reintroduction, a battle to bring it back in a world where we have now 3 major religions at each other's throats and every ism on the planet going, adding to the mess. So we might as well party on down and get to know ourselves, and have dominion. It's like Dominion over self is how we rule. And justice is the lustrous crowning jewel. The light of truth comes shining through for all the people in the world like you and me. And that's the silent revolution of truth as well. So I'm going to do one more little lyric, if I may, that takes it out of one place and puts it in another. You wander through the world, you know there's something you were born to do. And everywhere you wander, you'll hear your destiny call out to you. It's ringing true, for you are the hope of tomorrow. Yours are the dreams that never sleep. You're the one for whom life has just begun. You will find the stars within your reach. And you're gathering together everybody that you meet along the way, showing them the power of a heart that's free to give its love away. They'll hear you say, for you are the hope of tomorrow. Yours are the dreams that never sleep. You're the one for whom life has just begun. You will find the stars within your reach. But in a darkened moment when you fear there's not enough reason to keep going, instead of giving up, remember, for you are the hope of tomorrow. Yours are the dreams that never sleep. You're the one for whom life has just begun. You will find the stars within your reach. So that is a mini workshop with little suggestions placed in there, right? The workshop, I'm just going to tell you what's available. We're not going to do a big hard commercial, but I have to do something. So this is the Standing in Spirit DVD, which has some of the play hour and spiritual teachings on it and information, plus something like a 20, 30-minute workshop where you actually can sit while there's people doing it. You can do it for a longer period of time and be with it. This is, I'll mention this one. I haven't really put focus on it. I only mentioned the beginning. The Meyer Contacts DVD, I put it out in 2004, and I talked about material in the Meyer case from 1981 and 87, and some of the things that he put in prophecy and prediction back then and that are on this DVD occurred after this DVD came out. I call that legal proof. In other words, there's a copyright date on here. Even if you don't believe Meyer said it in 81, 87, as I reported, it's on this, and the events happened a year and a half later. Such things as the Paris riots by the Islamic inhabitants and other things, and some things on there that we, with our Salome meditations and our standing in spirit, can see to and assure do not have to occur. You know, if we are guided by our inner wisdom, we are able to create a peaceful kingdom. And this, oops, I'm now running on reserve battery, okay. This is what this is about. The DVD is very comprehensive. It was the first one I put out. So it had the prophecies, predictions, and all this stuff. And I call it a collector's item because it will be something that you can turn to anybody and say, this has legitimate proof. If you don't even want to believe the photos are real and the scientific experts we quote on there and the metal sample analysis and the sound recordings and the rest of the 2 hours of it, see those things written there? Look at the copyright date and go on the internet and search and find out when those things happened. And they happened afterwards. And Still They Fly is a wonderful book by Guido Musburger, in which those earlier quotes about diplomacy and the hard language of truth. And I hope at this stage right now that you will understand that I'm not here to diss people. I'm not allergic to defending myself, and I don't mind that. And I think some things have to be said. But the main thing is that when we get into the language of truth, we're not afraid to be wrong. We're not afraid to be corrected. We don't have to make ourselves more than we are falsely, because what we are, in essence, is far greater than anything we could represent or concoct, being experts on anything or ET contactees or what have you. Again, this has things in it that were published and that occurred after the publication. So it's another great little item. The Talmud Emmanuel will be out in a few weeks. If you go to my website and you sign up on my website, I don't sell your name and I don't spam you. I will send you a notice as soon as the Talmud is out. You can read it for yourself. You can also then have the prophecies and predictions of Jeremiah and Elijah and Emmanuel, and you can make of it what you will. The letter from Issa Rashid to Billy Myers in there, Myers' own comments and stuff. It's in German and in English, as they require these documents to be. That is the ball of wax up until now, the Meyer update as of 2007. And some other components. The film will be out. We can't give you the exact date, but summer of 2007 is what we're saying. And if you like that little trailer, this will have a certain romantic and poetic quality to it, but we're putting this stuff out there for everybody to evaluate on their own. And so the only thing I can say at this point is I thank you very much for participating, for observing, sitting through it, and all the rest of it. And we'll be, if anybody wants the DVD or anything like that, we're in that room for a little bit until we have a meeting we have to go to, but we're in the main room over there. And feel free to find my associate Leon and me over there in a few minutes, okay? Thanks. Thank you.